Chapter 170. Near the ruins of the Leshan giant Buddha, more than 300 blood breeds were planning to fly to base C7. But at this moment, they realized that not far below, there was a group of humans heading towards them. The leading hawk-nosed blood breed immediately waved his hand. The group of blood breeds was about to land on the ground. But at this moment, the hawk-nosed blood breed suddenly raised his hand and stopped the blood breeds. He turned to look towards the north. In the wilderness, a figure was rushing towards them at a speed of 1,000 meters per second. The hawk-nosed blue blood breed was slightly startled. The other blood breeds were also a little surprised. What a fast speed! The hawk-nosed youth said to a level 10 mutant blood breed next to him. This human is not simple. He might be the murderer. Capture him. The level 10 mutant blood breed nodded. Yes. Then he retracted his wings and flew down. He was about to reach Immortal's virus clone. However, Immortal's virus clone only used telekinesis to sweep past him. Rip, the level 10 mutant blood breed was instantly torn in half. This scene caused shock to appear on the pale faces of the 300-plus blood clan members in the sky. Oh no, he's psychokinesis. I'm afraid he's already level 10. Some blood breeds said in panic. They had seen level 10 psychokinesis among humans before. He fought against 2 level 1 mutant blood breeds with his own strength. This showed how powerful level 10 psychokinesis was. Thinking of this, the hawk-nosed blood breed ordered the level 3 mutant blood breed next to him. This lowly human dared to kill the Smith breeds. His crime is unforgivable. Kill him for me. The level 3 mutant blood breed replied, yes. He immediately flew down. At this moment, a black spear condensed in the virus clone's right hand. Sky Regicide Dragon Spear. Then with a roar, he threw it at the level 3 mutant blood breed. Whoosh, the black dragon spear shone with a metallic luster under the sunlight. It streaked across the sky like a rainbow. Its speed was as fast as lightning. Poof! It instantly pierced through the level 3 mutant blood breed's mouth. The huge inertia caused the level 3 super mutant blood clan member to fly back 100 meters. Finally, with a ding sound, it was nailed to the cliff behind. 2/3 of the entire front part of the dragon spear sank into the head of the level 3 super variant zombie and the cliff. Only 1/3 of it was left, more than a meter out of his mouth. His body was nailed to the cliff. As a gust of wind blew, it swayed left and right like a pendulum. All the members of the blood clan gasped when they saw this. How was this possible? How could a lowly human be so powerful? They had never met such a human when they were roaming the Americas. This was especially true for the eagle-nosed leader of the blood race. He was both shocked and furious. His great-grandfather had sent him to the east to investigate the murderer. Along the way, they would conquer the entire east. They had just arrived, and they had already lost a level 3 blood breed. How could they conquer the east? Shocked and furious, his figure flashed and instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind the virus clone. The next moment, the claws on his wings extended and stabbed into the virus clone's back. Rip, the sound of cloth being torn could be heard. The virus clone was directly torn in half. His pale face revealed a hint of ferocity. Lowly human, lowly species, how dare you provoke the noble blood clan? The rest of the blood clan heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this. The eagle-nosed blood race glanced at all his clansmen and said, without a doubt, this human is the murderer of my clansmen. Now that the murderer is dead, we will start by conquering this ancient country and conquer the entire Asia. The rest of the blood clan lowered their heads, yes. At the same time, on the mountain top far away, the hunters saw this scene and were all shocked. These guys seemed to be some Western mutated creatures. Was the person they just killed a mysterious elite? A few days ago, I saw the mysterious elite destroy a virus hive from afar. That must be the mysterious elite. At this point, everyone's heart was shrouded in a haze. The mysterious elite was the strongest human they had ever seen. They had seen the mysterious elite cleaning up infected creatures in the vicinity many times. And now, the mysterious elite had been killed. And he was killed in an instant. How strong were these people from the west? At this moment, the leader saw the direction the Blood Clan was flying in and his face suddenly changed. Oh no, they are coming towards us. Hide quickly. But at this moment, another human figure suddenly appeared in the sky without any warning. He blocked all the Blood Clan. This figure was exactly the same as the mysterious elite from before. The only difference was that he was wearing different clothes. The Blood Clan were all stunned. Why did this person look exactly the same as the human from before? Twins? Because he had seen the strength of the human just now, even the eagle-nosed Blood Clan member didn't dare to be careless now. Lowly human, lowly species. How dare you offend the noble Blood Clan? Before he finished speaking, his figure suddenly disappeared again. When he reappeared, he was already behind Immortal. A pair of sharp claws on his wings had already reached out. However, at this moment, his face suddenly changed dramatically. Because he saw that the human had turned around without him knowing. He seemed to be waiting for him. How was this possible? Although the Blood Clan's flying speed wasn't very fast, their explosive speed was definitely incomparable to other creatures. But now, this human could actually catch up with his speed? But at this moment, he didn't have time to think too much. His sharp claws suddenly reached out and directly pierced towards Immortal's chest. At this moment, a blood-red long saber appeared in Immortal's hand. The long saber was streamlined and very high-tech. Dark Ice Devil Slaying Saber. When the Blood Clan member's sharp claws reached in front of him, the Dark Ice Devil Slaying Saber in his hand gently slashed. Whoosh whoosh, two soft sounds. The pair of sharp claws was instantly cut off. Seeing this, the eagle-nosed Blood Clan member was shocked. He hurriedly wanted to retreat. But there was no time to retreat. The surface of his body was covered by a thick layer of ice. At the same time, this layer of ice continued to spread in all directions. Within a radius of 1 kilometer, the ground, trees, stones, and river were all covered by a thick layer of ice. Even the bodies of the more than 300 Blood Clan members in the sky were covered by a layer of ice almost instantaneously. They were like more than 300 ice sculptures. These more than 300 ice sculptures fell directly from a height of 100 meters. They smashed onto the ground with a thud. And the layer of ice on their bodies was extremely strong. Even if they fell from a height of 100 meters, the ice didn't break. They were still complete ice sculptures. As for the eagle-nosed Blood Clan member, not only was his outer appearance frozen into an ice sculpture, his body was also constantly being corroded by strong acid. His blood-red eyes were filled with endless fear. But he couldn't move at all. Chapter 171. The mystical ice devil slayer only needed one slash. And it was only on the claw of the level 8 super mutant vampire. As a result, the area within a 1 kilometer radius was instantly frozen. The hawk-nosed vampire who was slashed naturally couldn't escape death. What surprised Immortal was that the rest of the vampires were all frozen as well. And after being frozen, the cold air penetrated into their bones. Their blood solidified at an extremely fast speed, and their bones became extremely fragile under the ultra-low temperature of the ice. Immortal's dragon sense swept across. Whoosh, the sound of ice breaking was heard. The 300 ice sculptures all shattered at the same time. They shattered into blood-colored ice pieces on the ground. On the mountain top in the distance, the human hunters saw this scene and were all surprised and happy. Mysterious powerhouse, this is the real mysterious powerhouse. One-hit kill. A real one-hit kill. That guy with wings should be a super mutant zombie. But he was killed by the mysterious powerhouse in one hit. How strong is he? I'm more concerned about the one who died before. Could it be the clone of the mysterious powerhouse? Well, it's possible. I heard that the mysterious powerhouse is a human from the C1 base. Maybe they used the genes of the mysterious powerhouse to clone some clones. At this time, Mosher looked at the mystical ice devil slayer in his hand. This blade did have a strong restraining effect on vampires. Vampires also had an extremely strong self-healing ability. But the extremely cold air released by the mystical ice devil slayer could make their cells completely lose their vitality. In other words, it could directly kill their cells. This way, their self-healing ability wouldn't be of use. Putting away the mystical ice devil slayer, Mosher checked the memories of the few vampires that he had just plundered in his mind. He had a rough understanding of the Smith family's strength. There were more than 30 super mutants. There were 2 level 10 super mutants. There were more than 30,000 below super mutants. Other than that, under their rule, all the zombies in San Francisco added up to more than 8 million. No wonder they wanted to sweep the East. Normally, with such strength, it wouldn't be a problem to sweep the East. But unfortunately, they met Mosher. There was a saying, those who offend my Debong will be punished no matter how far away they are. Since they had repeatedly invaded, then it was necessary to pay them a visit. Clean them up from the roots. However, before going to America, Mosher planned to reach level 7 first. Although Mosher was at level 6, he had a 90% chance of wiping out the Smith family. However, if he wasn't 100% sure, he wouldn't easily make a move. Moreover, Mosher knew from the memories of that hook-nosed vampire that the Smiths weren't the only vampire clan. The ancestor of the blood race was actually Count Dracula. As for the blood clan that Count Dracula had transformed into, there were as many as 13 families. These 13 families now ruled almost 2/3 of the Western world. If Mosher wanted to exterminate the Smith family, he would become the enemy of all vampires. Therefore, it would be good if he could improve his strength before going to the west. Thinking of this, a pair of blood dragon wings appeared on his back. After a slight tremor, he flew toward base C1. At the same time, in America's San Francisco base, Stanford University, the president's office. Amidst the elegant classical music, the ancestor of the Smith family was carefully reading The Silence of the Lambs. From top to bottom, from inside to outside, he exuded an elegant temperament. However, at a certain moment, he suddenly raised his head and looked at the night sky in the east. There was a trace of murderous intent between his brows. He could clearly sense that the 300 or so members of the Smith family that he had sent had all been killed. One was a level 8 super mutant, and the other was a level 3 super mutant. They had more than 300 strong mutant vampires. He had thought that such a force could easily wipe out the barren land in the east. However, he didn't expect that the 300 or so people would be wiped out as soon as they arrived in the east. Preposterous. How preposterous. Even someone as elegant as him couldn't hide the anger in his heart at this moment. Men. Call all the vampires back. In 10 days, I will wipe out the barren land in Asia. 9 days later, at night. Mosher switched his consciousness into the body of the Sea Dragon clone. At this time, the Sea Dragon clone had already reached 15 meters. Its level had risen to level 5 super mutant. Its telekinesis had also risen to level 5. In fact, at the beginning, Mosher wanted to directly let it use the dragon mind. However, after using it a few times, he found that the dragon mind was still too powerful and overbearing. With the strength of its brain cells, it couldn't withstand the overbearing dragon mind at all. Every time the dragon mind attacked, the Sea Dragon clone would wither for a while. Mo Shi had also tried to let it take brain cell enhancers. However, for some reason, the brain cell enhancers had little effect on it. Therefore, he could only let it use its telekinesis for the time being. After it became a super mutant, it might be able to use the dragon mind. A level 5 super mutant coupled with level 5 telekinesis. As long as it wasn't too stubborn to fight a super mutant, it would be very safe in the entire Yellow River. Mo Shi thought to himself that after returning from the west, he would seize the time to raise its level. After all, the upper limit of the sea dragon clone was a level higher than his own body. A moment later, his consciousness switched back to his body. Looking at the time, it was already 11:30 at night. It seemed that nothing special would happen today. He said in his mind, "System, specify the bloodline modification liquid and double the sign-in." The system replied instantly as usual, frowny face, sign-in successful. Sign-in reward, 2,000 drops of Titan Dragon bloodline modification liquid. Soon, 2,000 small bottles appeared in his system backpack. Mo Shi took out 100 bottles each time. With a thought, the dragon mind opened these 100 bottles. With another thought, the 100 drops of modification liquid condensed into a water ball the size of an egg. He swallowed it in one gulp. And so it went back and forth. When he finished swallowing all 2,000 drops of modification liquid, the heat in his body surged again. In 5 minutes, his body temperature had reached its limit. As the heat flowed through his body, he could use his draconic telekinesis to detect where the heat flowed through. His cells became stronger once again. The capacity inside also increased. Now, every upgrade was to prepare for the realm after the Great Hunter realm. After the Great Hunter realm, he would be able to use energy in the true sense. And energy was usually stored in every cell in the body. Therefore, the stronger the cells were now, the more capacity they would have. After reaching that realm in the future, the more energy there would be in the body. Imagine, at the same level, your energy was more than 10 times or even dozens of times more than that of others. Wouldn't you be able to easily defeat your opponent? Chapter 172. During the process of upgrading, Mo Shi suddenly had an idea. Since his cells would have to withstand energy in the future, did that mean that he could use the energy on his back to temper his cells now? This way, when he reached that level in the future, his cells would be able to accept that energy with ease. At the same time, he would be more familiar with energy. Thinking of this, he tried to transfer the energy he had obtained from the Plague Dragon's ruins to his entire body. However, he did not have a way to transfer the energy at all. Naturally, it was impossible. However, a moment later, he suddenly thought of whether he could use the dragon's will to forcefully transfer the energy to other cells in his body. In the end, he tried it and it really worked. He immediately used the dragon's will to transfer all the energy on his back to all the cells in his body. In fact, telekinesis was a mental ability and had nothing to do with energy. Normal telekinesis masters couldn't use telekinesis to move energy. However, the dragon's will could. The dragon's will was a unique telekinesis of the dragon race. This kind of telekinesis was a mixture of spirit and energy. It was a special kind of spirit energy. Therefore, he could use the dragon's will to transfer energy. This blood-red energy was transferred to all the cells in Mo Shi's body. His cells suddenly swelled. It was as if they were about to explode in an instant. Fortunately, his cells had been modified by the modification liquid and had far exceeded the strength of human cells. Therefore, although his skin was red and seemed like it could explode at any time, he was still barely able to withstand this energy. This process only lasted for a minute before Mo Shi felt that he could no longer withstand it. He could only hurriedly transfer all the energy back to the shoulder blades on his back. This energy seemed to only be obedient when it was in the shoulder blades. Phew, he let out a long breath. Mo Shi used the dragon's will to explore every cell in his body. He could clearly feel that every cell was several times stronger than before. Their capacity was also several times larger than before. He could not help but feel happy. So this really worked. If he had known earlier, he would have used this energy to temper his body long ago. In fact, Mo Shi was still thinking too much. Before he reached level 7, his body could not withstand the impact of that huge energy. Now that he had just reached level 7, it was just right to temper his cells. At this moment, Mo Shi's body temperature returned to normal. He checked the attribute interface in his mind. Name, Mo Shi, Level 7 Great Hunter, Level 2 Long Nian Shi, Evolution Direction, Titan Dragon. He had finally become a Level 7 Great Hunter. At Level 7, he was confident that he could defeat any Level 10 Great Hunter or Level 10 Super Mutated Creature. Since he had leveled up, he should go to San Francisco tomorrow. The next morning, when Mo Shi ate breakfast, he habitually used the blood dragon's eyes to observe Happy. Happy's attributes appeared in his mind. Species, human, level. Level Oracle, unawakened, ability, unknown. Mo Shi's eyes lit up. Finally, there was one less question mark. Happy was only a question mark away from truly awakening to the power of a prophet. Happy saw that Mo Shi seemed to be looking at her lecherously. She couldn't help but blush and lower her head. His heart was pounding like a crazy rabbit. Mo Shi loved to see Happy's bashful expression. He looked at it even more seriously. Happy occasionally raised her head and saw that Mo Shi's gaze seemed to be even more lecherous. She couldn't help but feel her heart beat faster. Mo Shi couldn't help but laugh. After breakfast, Mo Shi told Happy that he had to go out for a while. Happy made a sign. Go early and come back early. Mo Shi nodded, then used Dragon Shadow Steps and ran towards San Francisco. It was more than 10,000 kilometers away. If he used Dragon Shadow Steps, he would only need to take more than 1,000 steps. But because there was a large part of the journey in the middle, he had to cross the sea. Therefore, Mo Shi could only fly most of the time. He traveled 1,000 meters per second, and there was a delay of a few minutes. In the end, it took him more than 20 minutes to reach the sky above San Francisco. Looking down from here, he saw that the entire San Francisco was red. There were actually 5 mother nests in San Francisco. Thousands of blood-red vines spread out from the 5 mother nests. These blood-colored vines crawled all over the buildings, all the streets, the broken lampposts, and the overturned cars. They almost occupied the entire city. Along with the blood-red vines, zombies also occupied the entire city. Before the apocalypse, there were only more than 800,000 people in San Francisco. But the nearby Bay Area had more than 7.6 million people. When the vampires attacked the San Francisco base, the 7.6 million infected zombies also focused on attacking the San Francisco base. Now, the vampires had occupied the San Francisco base. More than 8 million zombies were wandering around the San Francisco base. The Golden Gate Bridge, which had been broken countless times in countless movies and TV shows, was really broken now. There were countless blood-red vines hanging down from it. In the setting sun, the blood-red vines looked like thousands of blood snakes, sticking their heads under the bridge to drink water. It looked exceptionally strange. On the shore of the strait under the bridge, a rusty aircraft carrier lay diagonally on the shore. It was like an old man who didn't have much time left, lying on a recliner at the door, feeling sad and self-pity at the setting sun. In the city, collapsed buildings could occasionally be seen. What used to be the walls of the base were now nothing but rubble. Mo Shi looked down with the blood dragon's eye. He saw that the entire city was shrouded in an extremely dense corpse aura. In this corpse aura, he could also see an even denser and blood-red blood aura. Obviously, this blood aura was emitted by the vampires. For any other human, this city was hell. But for Mo Sure, it was just another place where evolution points gathered. He glanced at the evolution points in his mind. Now, his evolution points had reached 7.1 billion. After destroying all the infected creatures in this city, his evolution points should be able to break through 8 billion. At the same time, in this city, the only place that was not covered by the Sanguisurincus was the former Stanford University. This place was still covered by green plants. At this time, in the open space in front of the principal's office at Stanford University, there were more than 30,000 members of the blood race standing there silently. Each of them had a pair of bat-like wings. Their faces were pale, and their eyes were blood-red. In the sky in front of them, 2 vampires flapped their wings and floated in the air. These 2 vampires were both level 10 super-mutated vampires. One of them was the ancestor of the Smith family. The other was his wife. The ancestor of the Smith family sized up the 30,000 vampires below with his blood-red eyes. He let out a half-human, half-bat voice from his throat. In the wilderness to the east, there are inferior humans who dare to hurt the people of the Smith family. Their dirty claws cut open the noble bodies of the vampires. Their despicable actions tarnished the noble souls of the vampires. They dare to offend the vampires, offend the Smith family. Our response is only one word: all the 30,000 vampires of the Smith family had blood-red eyes and pale faces. They raised their right arms and shouted in unison, "Kill!" Chapter 173. The Smith family had more than 30,000 clansmen. Among these clansmen, the weakest had already reached level 5 strong mutant vampire. There were more than 30 super mutant vampires. The 2 strongest among them had already reached level 10 super mutant. If the human world knew that there was such a force, they would probably be in despair. With such a huge force, there was no need to think about when the human civilization could be rebuilt. Thinking about the current number of humans, how they could survive was the most important thing. Under the instigation of Elder Smith, the 30,000 vampires were furious. Despicable low-class humans, how dare they use their dirty claws to blaspheme the noble bodies and souls of the vampires? Kill them. The low-class species in the wilderness have no civilization to speak of. To deal with such species, we can only use violence to curb violence. The vampires will conquer the entire world. In the sky above San Francisco, Mo Sure's dragons will detected this. There was not a trace of emotion in her cold eyes. You have no chance to kill your way to the east. Because I'm here. In the next moment, Mo Sure's dragons will moved. In the dilapidated city of San Francisco. On the road. A wandering zombie's body suddenly froze. Then, its head actually rolled down to the ground. The skin and flesh on its body began to fall off. Then, its internal organs and bones. In the end, its body was like melted chocolate, forming a sticky mass of flesh and blood. Its head saw its body turn into flesh and blood with its own eyes and instinctively struggled to escape. Roar, its mouth was also constantly letting out fearful roars. But without arms and legs, how could a head run? Could it use its teeth to open and close and support its head to escape? A moment later, its head was also like melted chocolate. It gradually turned into a mass of flesh and blood and merged with its body. At the same time, around this zombie. On the streets, in the cars, in the shopping mall, in the amusement park. Like it, all the other zombies began to melt. Not far away, a strong mutated zombie saw this scene. Its eyes were filled with endless fear. Just think about it, how strange and terrifying would it be if everyone around him suddenly melted like chocolate? In its fear, the strong mutated zombie quickly jumped and fled into the distance. However, when it landed on the ground, it smashed heavily into the ground. He rolled another 20 meters before finally coming to a stop. It quickly sat up and looked at Xianxia. He saw that his feet had already melted. Then, its legs and hands melted as well. He screamed in terror. No! However, this roar only came out halfway before it abruptly stopped. Because even his neck had melted. At the same time, the same scene was happening in every corner of the city. Among the more than 8 million zombies, except for the super-mutated zombies, the rest were all melting into a mass of flesh and blood. Then, the flesh began to wriggle and wriggle faster and faster. Looking down from the sky, one could see that all the flesh and blood in the city were on the streets, gathering in the direction of a park. When those super-mutant zombies saw this scene, they were all terrified. The scene before their eyes had completely exceeded their understanding. They had no idea what was going on. They could only flee in all directions, trying to avoid this sudden disaster and prevent their bodies from melting. The wriggling flesh and blood on the street eventually gathered and took shape in the park. First, a pair of huge feet condensed. Then, a pair of feet and legs condensed on this pair of feet. Then, an upper body slowly condensed. In Stanford University, Ancestor Smith was passionately motivating the people before the war. At this moment, a vampire suddenly discovered that in the city behind Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a huge blood-colored figure was slowly condensing and taking shape in the distance. The vampire's heart skipped a beat as he pointed in that direction. What's that? The other vampires also saw the huge figure. All of them had shocked expressions on their faces. When Ancestor Smith saw that a vampire dared to disrupt his speech, a trace of anger flashed across his brows. However, because he had to maintain an elegant posture, this trace of anger quickly disappeared. He reminded. When others speak, it's best to listen carefully. This is respect for others and also a sign of education. At the same time, it's also a necessary quality to become an elegant vampire. In the past, when Ancestor Smith reminded these vampires, they would immediately realize that they had made a big mistake. They would apologize to him immediately. However, this time, not only did these vampire disciples not apologize, but even more of them started to make a ruckus. Even more anger flashed across Ancestor Smith's brows. He was about to reprimand these disciples. As an elegant vampire, no matter what happened, they shouldn't be so noisy. However, at this moment, his wife beside him whispered, "Dear, something happened." Hearing this, Smith turned around. He followed his wife's gaze. When he saw it, his heart couldn't help but tremble. He saw that between the skyscrapers in the distance, a huge blood-red body was slowly condensing and taking shape. At this moment, the entire body had already condensed and formed, leaving only half of the head. A moment later, the huge head had also condensed and formed. Could it be that those dirty zombies have mutated into giant zombies? No, it doesn't look like a zombie. I think I've seen it somewhere before, but I can't tell where. A trace of inexplicable fear appeared in the hearts of the vampire disciples. In the face of the unknown, humans would feel fear. Similarly, bloodstains would also cause fear. Ancestor Smith had read a lot of books, so he recognized it at a glance. He exclaimed in disbelief, "Buddha." That's right, this was a Buddha. It was almost identical to the Leshan Great Buddha. Its legs were bent, and it was sitting on a foundation made of flesh and blood. Its expression was serene and calm. Its eyes were lowered, looking down at all living beings. However, this Buddha was more than 10 times taller than the Leshan Great Buddha. It was more than 1,000 meters tall. And the Buddha's body was blood-red. The entire Buddha's body seemed to be emitting a vast demonic aura. It was gloomy and filled with demonic aura. Even these vampires didn't seem to dare to look directly at it. Buddha was originally a symbol of light and majesty. But now, this blood Buddha was emitting a demonic aura that even the vampires didn't dare to look directly at. With this demonic aura, it intimidated all demons. All the vampires below the supermutation level were terrified when they saw this huge blood Buddha. they couldn't summon the slightest thought of resisting at all. Even the super-mutated vampires only had one thought when they saw this huge blood Buddha. Run! Mr. and Mrs. Smith were level 10 super-mutated vampires. They were the most powerful beings in the entire city. Their feelings were especially obvious. Chapter 174. The huge blood Buddha not only made all the vampires panic. Even the two strongest existences of the vampires, the level 10 super-mutated vampires, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, were terrified. As level 10 super-mutated vampires, they felt this blood Buddha more clearly than the other vampires. It was like a primary school student compared to a boxing champion. Although he knew that this boxing champion was very powerful, he could not personally experience how terrifying this boxing champion was. And a boxer who had really learned boxing for a few days, when facing the boxing champion, would feel far more real than a child, and he would be more aware of the boxing champion's terrifying strength. At this moment, the 1,000-meter-tall blood Buddha with monstrous demonic aura slowly moved. It slowly raised its right hand. Then, it slowly pressed towards the ground. At the same time, the flesh and blood on the blood Buddha's body kept gathering towards the giant palm. In the beginning, the giant palm was only more than 100 meters wide and less than 200 meters long. But as the flesh and blood on its body kept gathering on the giant palm, the Buddha's palm began to rapidly grow longer, wider, and thicker. Its length changed from more than 100 meters to 200 meters. 400 meters, 800 meters, in the end, all the flesh and blood on the blood Buddha's body merged into the giant palm. The length of the giant palm actually reached 5,000 meters. Its width was also 3,000 meters. The huge blood-red palm covered 1/3 of the sky in San Francisco. Then, the blood-red palm accelerated. From a height of 500 meters, it suddenly slapped down. In Stanford University, which was covered by the blood palm. The 30,000 members of the blood race were terrified. They wanted to escape. But they found that they couldn't even move their feet. The vampires above the supermutation wanted to display the speed that they were most proud of. But when the huge blood palm slapped down, they found that they seemed to be moving in thick honey. It was almost impossible to move an inch. Mr. and Mrs. Smith were the fastest to react. When the blood palm was still in the process of condensing, they had already turned around and fled. However, at this moment, when the blood palm was condensed, their speed also suddenly decreased. Ancestor Smith raised his head and looked at the huge blood palm. The palm lines on the blood palm were like ravines. It pressed down on him. At this moment, Smith could no longer maintain his elegance. Who said that one had to maintain elegance in the face of pressure? It was pure nonsense. To be able to maintain grace in the face of death was definitely a lunatic, a pervert. Smith, on the other hand, was a normal vampire. The next moment. Boom! The gigantic bloody palm that was 5,000 meters long slammed heavily onto the ground. The earth shook violently. All the skyscrapers in the city collapsed under the violent shaking. Around the giant palm, shockwaves swept across everything on the ground and spread out in all directions. Abandoned cars were sent flying. Abandoned phone booths were also uprooted. The debris of the collapsing building was also swept away by the shockwave and flew into the distance. The shockwave was like a tsunami. In just a few seconds, it swept through the entire city. At the edge of the city, when the shock wave swept over, the Golden Gate Strait stirred up huge waves. The worn-out aircraft carrier was directly swept to the mountainside on the opposite shore by the huge wave. Then it rolled along the hillside. With a loud splash, he fell into the Golden Gate Strait. Huge waves were created. The Golden Gate Bridge, which was already broken, creaked and groaned in the shock wave. It twisted and fell into the sea. After a full 5 minutes, the shockwave tsunami slowly disappeared. Then, he looked at the city shrouded in smoke and dust. It was as if it had just experienced a meteorite impact. The entire city had been razed to the ground. All that was left of the 5 mother nests were broken walls and dilapidated walls. Just the aftermath of the bloody palm destroyed the 5 mother nests and the super-mutated zombies in the 5 mother nests. All the sanguisurincus in the city were swept away by the shockwave. The blood-red plants had also completely disappeared. The blood-red walls were completely destroyed. The blood-red ground seemed to have been washed away. The entire city was not blood-red at all at this time. The blood-red giant palm was condensed from the flesh and blood of the infected body. It should have generated a stronger infection body. However, the truth was that the blood-red giant palm slammed down. It killed all the demons and cleansed the universe. The entire world was quiet, looking at Stanford University again. At this time, there was no trace of Stanford University. There was only a huge palm print that was 5 kilometers long, 3 kilometers wide, and 5 meters deep left there. And this huge palm print was blood red in color. All the red color in San Francisco had retreated. Only this huge palm print was left, as red as blood. If I become a demon, there will be no demons in the world. Sweeping across the 8 wastelands, swallowing the 6 directions. This was the Blood Buddha clone, the realm of the blood palm. In the blood palm, the 30,000 vampires had long disappeared. Not even their flesh was left. The only thing left were 2 broken heads. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. At this time, the heads of the couple were badly mutilated. Their skulls could be seen directly. But their eyes still barely retained a trace of life. In their eyes, there was fear, despair, and confusion, many complicated emotions intertwined. They didn't know who they had offended. They didn't know who had such terrifying strength. Killing 30,000 vampires with 1 palm. Even the 2 super-mutated vampires didn't have the chance to escape. It was too terrifying. It was really too terrifying. Thinking of the Blood Buddha from before, he seemed to understand a little. That was the mysterious power from the mysterious East. Since ancient times, he had often heard people say that the mysterious East possessed a mysterious power. However, after becoming a vampire, he threw all of this to the back of his mind. Especially after becoming a level 10 super-mutated vampire, he was even more disdainful of the mysterious East. What mysterious power was more mysterious than the noble vampires? It was just a group of uncivilized barbarians. However, now he knew that there really was a mysterious power. Especially that eastern country, it was a mysterious and powerful country. He shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have sent people to that country. He shouldn't have provoked that mysterious power. However, it was too late for regret. At this time, under the suppression of this mysterious power, even his self-healing ability had disappeared. In the midst of all the regret, the Smith couple's consciousness gradually became confused. At the last moment before their consciousness completely fell into darkness, they seemed to see a figure from the east in the sky. The blood-red wings behind him were so red that they shone under the setting sun. These blood-red wings were thousands of times more noble than the bat wings of the vampires. In the next moment, the 2 of them completely lost consciousness. Even their only heads had turned into blood and seeped into the ground. At this time, Immortal was floating in the air above San Francisco. Looking down at the ruins of the city that seemed to have been hit by a nuclear bomb, there was also a trace of shock in his eyes. The bloody handprint that absorbed 8 million zombies was actually so terrifying. With 1 palm, a city was destroyed just like that. None of the 30,000 vampires could resist at all. And just now, when his consciousness entered the Blood Buddha clone, he looked down on everything and looked down on the common people. He truly understood a sentence: all living things are ants. He looked down at the ruins of the city. Although the city was destroyed, all the blood-red vines, zombies, hives, and vampires were also destroyed at the same time. He seemed to have understood something in his heart. He murmured, "All living things are ants, and everything is like floating clouds." Chapter 175. Mo Shi's consciousness was in the Blood Buddha avatar just now, looking at the world from the perspective of the Blood Buddha. The feeling of being the world and looking down on all living things gave him a hint of enlightenment in his heart. Tens of thousands of ants, only I am supreme. With this hint of enlightenment, Mo Shi's dragon's will, which hadn't increased for a long time, actually grew rapidly. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, in the end, his dragon's will actually reached 10 times more than before. Only then did the growth of his dragon's will stop. This was a pleasant surprise. Mo Shi could feel that if he had this enlightenment 2 more times, his dragon's will could be upgraded to level 3. If it reached level 3, he might be able to easily crush a level 10 super mutant vampire with just his dragon's will. Then, Mo Shi took a look at his evolution points in his mind. The more than 8 million mutated zombies and more than 30,000 vampires just now gave him nearly 1 billion evolution points. The total number of evolution points had already exceeded 8 billion. He only needed the last 2 billion to upgrade the system again. Next, Mo Shi said in his mind, "System, sign in for a special event." The system's voice quickly sounded frowny face sign in successful. Sign in event, eliminate the vampire Smith family, sign in reward, 1 blood slave, blood slave. Mo Shi checked this reward in his mind. This blood slave was a small bat the size of a palm. It looked like an ordinary bat. When Mo Shi focused all his attention on this blood slave, a line of words appeared. Blood slave, condensed from the flesh and blood of vampires. Dragon's will can be poured into it and used as a scout. The blood slave can ignore any detection of telekinesis, energy, consciousness, danger perception, and the like. Mo Shi was secretly happy. This blood slave came at the right time. Just before Ancestor Smith died, he plundered the memories of that ancestor. From that guy's memories, he knew that there were 12 other families in the vampire race. The number of vampires in each family reached tens of thousands. Every family had a level 10 super mutant vampire. And above all these families was the true ancestor of the vampire race, Count Dracula. He was a member of the blood race who stood at the pinnacle of the world. Its ability was far beyond that of a normal level 10 blood breed. There was some kind of restriction in this world. As long as he reached level 10, he would encounter that restriction. Even if the strength of his body could continue to increase, and his speed could continue to increase. However, he was still unable to break through his limits and reach the next realm. Count Dracula, the ancestor of the blood race, was a super powerful being who was infinitely close to breaking through that limit. As for how strong he was, no one knew. Because no one had ever seen Count Dracula. Mo Shi was still thinking about how to find out more about Count Dracula's lair. Now that he had this blood thrall, he didn't have to worry about it anymore. With a thought, he took out the blood slave from his backpack. At this moment, the blood slave did not have any consciousness. It remained motionless in Mo Shi's palm. It seemed to be just a lifelike bat. He split a strand of dragon will and infused it into the bat's body. In the next moment, the bat seemed to come alive. It flapped its wings and flew up. Mo Shi could feel that after this strand of dragon will entered the blood slave's body, it was no longer his own dragon will. It had completely become the blood slave's dragon will and developed an independent consciousness. And it also had its own unique growth system. This growth system did not require Mo Shi to check on it from time to time like the sea dragon clone. The blood slave's growth was completely independent. Mo Shi did not need to care about it, and it could grow freely. Of course, it still obeyed Mo Shi's orders 100%. And it could also communicate with Mo Shi using dragon will and report the situation at any time. Mo Shi used dragon will to issue an order to the blood slave. Go to all the blood breed settlements and investigate their strength. The blood slave squeaked in response, flapped its wings, and silently disappeared into the darkness that gradually enveloped the earth. Mo Shi, on the other hand, took out the dragon's lair with a thought. He entered the dragon's lair to cultivate Long Wei. Although with his current strength, he was confident that he could dominate the world. But it was better to be careful. He would not act rashly before the blood slave figured out the situation. While cultivating Long Wei, he also tried to transfer the energy in his back and shoulder blades to his whole body again, using it to refine every cell in his body. This time, he managed to last several times longer than before. He could already last for half an hour. The next morning, after Mo Shi woke up, he used dragon will to communicate with the blood slave. The blood slave had already investigated the strength of the two blood breed families in one night. But Mo Shi did not immediately make a move. Instead, he ordered the blood slave in his mind. Continue to investigate the other families and find Count Dracula as soon as possible. The blood slave responded, flapped its wings, and continued to fly to the next blood breed family settlement. Mo Shi used Dragon Shadow Step and flew toward Quanhua City. Previously, from the broodmother's consciousness, he knew that the largest broodmother in Country M was in Manhattan, Quanhua City. It was more than 2,900 kilometers from San Francisco to Manhattan. With the speed of Mo Shi's Dragon Shadow Step and the delay on the way, it only took him 6 minutes. At this time, Mo Shi was standing on the first floor of the World Trade Center. This building was also known as the Freedom Tower. It was 541 meters tall, the tallest tower in Manhattan. Looking down from here, Manhattan was shrouded in the morning fog. There were dozens of tall buildings, piercing through the morning fog, towering over the city. Mo Shi's dragon will covered the entire city, investigating everything here. This was worthy of being the city with the most skyscrapers. The entire city was divided into two halves by red and green. The eastern half was covered with green vines and plants. Among them, there was a base, Manhattan Base. The buildings on the western half were covered with blood-red vines. These blood-red vines finally gathered in a huge broodmother. This huge broodmother occupied half of the city. One had to know that the entire Manhattan was about 60 square kilometers. This broodmother occupied half of the city. This was definitely the largest broodmother that Mo Shi had seen so far. This broodmother was not sealed like other broodmother. Instead, only half was sealed. The other half was like a bloody mouth that wanted to devour the remaining half of the city. Mo Shi was secretly amazed. This broodmother had a big appetite. It wanted to devour the entire Manhattan. Looking down with the blood dragon's eye, he saw that there were more than 10 mutated zombies around the broodmother. There were countless strong mutated zombies. Chapter 176. This huge mother nest was actually trying to swallow the entire city. And there was no doubt that if this continued, it would swallow the entire Quanhua City. Mo Shi did not immediately attack this mother nest. With the strength of the more than 10 level 10 super mutated zombies in this mother nest, it would be easy to attack the base on the other side of the city. But they had not attacked until now. It was obvious that there were other reasons. He planned to go to the base to investigate the situation first. With a thought, he probed the base. He saw that the base occupied 1/3 of Manhattan. On the high walls of the base, there were all kinds of cannons. Outside the high walls surrounding the base, there were dozens of tanks parked. But these cannons and tanks had long been rusted. Obviously, no one had used them for a long time. Under such circumstances, there must be a special reason why they could still defend until now. The high walls divided Manhattan into two. Inside the high walls was a green world. Outside the high walls was a blood-red world of zombies. But these zombies did not seem to have any intention of attacking the base. Just as Immortal was investigating, the thick metal door on the high walls slowly opened with a creaking sound. When the zombies outside the door saw the door open, their eyes were filled with bloodthirsty gazes. But even so, they did not pounce on the door. Instead, they seemed to be waiting for something. At this time, 2 naked men were carried out by 4 hunters and thrown out of the door. The 2 men begged and screamed miserably. "No, please, don't do this, don't do this." However, the hunters ignored their pleas. The creaking sound rang out again. The door slowly closed. Seeing this, the 2 men hurriedly pounced on the door. They kept banging on the door. They banged on the door. This banging sound echoed on the quiet street. At the same time, the eyes of the zombies who seemed to have been hungry for a long time bloomed with blood-red light. They roared and pounced on the 2 naked men with bared fangs and brandished claws. The 2 naked men were also hunters. They quickly condensed their genetic weapons and cleared the zombies around them. In just a few minutes, the hundreds of zombies around them were cleared. A thin layer of blood mist slowly rose into the air. But the 2 naked men did not have time to breathe a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a shadow flashed past them without warning. A line of blood appeared on each of their necks. When they turned around, they saw a zombie looking at them. There was a fist-sized hole on the zombie's face. Even so, it was still grinning. The scene looked very strange. The 2 naked men only had time to say, "Super mutation." He fell to the ground. The surrounding zombies immediately pounced on him. It was like a pack of wolves surrounding a sheep and gnawing at it. In just 5 minutes, the 2 of them were eaten. In front of this group of hungry zombies, the 2 hunters didn't even have the chance to turn into zombies. On the watchtower behind the high wall, the 2 hunters shook their heads as they watched the scene unfold. Immortal was puzzled when he saw this. What the hell happened in the Manhattan base? Using humans to feed zombies? Wasn't this a little too freakish? Shaking his head, he decided not to think about things that he couldn't figure out. He leaped and landed on the ground. He didn't use his telekinesis or wings to reduce the impact of his landing. The body of a level 7 great hunter was strong enough to withstand the impact of falling more than 500 meters. The wind whistled in his ears. The skyscraper next to him was rising rapidly. The next moment. Boom! Immortal's feet slammed heavily on the ground. The entire street, with Immortal as the center, instantly caved in a bowl-shaped crater with a radius of more than 50 meters. The ground within a radius of 100 meters cracked inch by inch under this huge impact. At this time, Immortal was slowly walking forward. Hundreds of zombies on the ground nearby were all sent flying hundreds of meters away by the force of his move. After landing, each of them had broken bones and tendons and couldn't get up. After hearing the noise, the zombies in the nearby streets all roared and rushed over. But soon, Sanguisurincus extended from the ground. This caused the Sanguisurincus to pierce into the bodies of these zombies, and then they were instantly torn apart. As long as Immortal passed by within a radius of 100 meters, Sanguisurincus as thick as a human thigh would constantly appear. These Sanguisurincus were like kelp, swaying in the air. As long as a zombie got close to the Sanguisurincus, it would be torn apart in an instant. As for those ordinary zombies, they were still stupid enough to pounce on them. But the strong mutated zombies, and even the super mutated zombies, didn't dare to come forward. Just like this, Immortal walked all the way to the entrance of the base. The zombies on the nearby streets were almost all cleared by him. On the sentry tower, the 2 hunters were still puzzled. Why were there suddenly no roars of zombies nearby? At this time, in the blood fog outside the entrance, a human figure slowly walked over. Is that a human? Seems like an Asian. What's going on? How could a human pass through the entire infected area? In his surprise, a hunter shouted to Mo, who was below him. "Stop! Who are you? Or a zombie?" Mo didn't pay attention to them. With a leap, he instantly soared into the air. He crossed the high wall and landed in the base. Seeing this, the two hunters hurriedly sounded the alarm. At the same time, their hurried shouts came from the loudspeaker. "A humanoid creature has broken in, it's very likely to be an infected person. An unidentified humanoid creature has broken in, it's very likely to be an infected person." Because zombies and vampires were all in human form, they collectively called them humanoid creatures. Soon, more than 200 hunters and 60 psychokinesis rushed out from all directions, surrounding Mo's cold eyes glanced around. Dragon's mind instantly spread out. It pressed down on all the hunters and psychokinesis. Bang 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 bang, all the hunters and psychokinesis were instantly crushed to the ground by the huge pressure. Psychokinesis was slightly better. When they fell to the ground, they only felt extreme pain in their bodies. As for the 200+ hunters, they smashed down with such force that the cement road cracked open. All the hunters raised their heads in pain and looked at this Asian in horror. It was obvious that this Asian was psychokinesis. But was there really a psychic in this world with such strong telekinesis? On the other hand, the fear and shock in the hearts of the 60 or so psychics far exceeded that of the hunters. As psychokinesis, they knew clearly that even if they reached level 10 psychokinesis, they were far from being able to do this. In other words, this Asian's psychokinesis had already surpassed the limit of level 10 psychokinesis. It had reached a level above psychokinesis. Chapter 177. In the Manhattan base, all the hunters and psychokinesis were looking at Mo in horror. They all had the same ridiculous thought in their minds. This Eastern psychokinesis might have broken through the limit of psychokinesis and reached the next level. No one knew what was stronger than psychokinesis. After all, up until now, none of the psychokinesis in the base had reached level 8. Not to mention breaking through the limit and reaching the next level. However, the power that Mo just showed made everyone understand that it was the next level of psychokinesis. Even the 2 level 7 telekinesis masters in the Manhattan base were unable to put up any resistance under the suppression of this Asian man's telekinesis. They were immediately crushed to the ground. As for the 2 strongest level 8 hunters in the base, even with their strong bodies, they couldn't even last a second under this Eastern man's psychokinesis. They were directly pressed to the ground. This kind of power was impossible for a level 10 psychokinesis to achieve. At this moment, Mo finally spoke slowly. "I'm just passing by and came in to ask a question." With the foreign language proficiency skill, he could speak any language on Earth at will. As soon as he said this, everyone else was stunned. Passing by? There were zombies everywhere outside, and there were even vampires that were stronger than zombies. How strong was he to be able to pass by in such an environment? The bald black hunter in the lead took a step forward and said, "That's right. Before we do a virus test, we must isolate you." Mo turned his head and slowly looked at the bald hunter. The bald hunter felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar when Mo glanced at him. This Eastern man's eyes were like an abyss. Just by looking at each other, they felt as if they could fall into the abyss and be swallowed by it. That kind of creepy feeling made all the hair on his body stand up. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva as his Adam's apple moved. He changed his words, "Okay. You can ask the general what you want to ask. I'll take you there now." The other hunters and psychics looked at the bald black man in confusion when they heard this. Every one of them had a black face full of question marks. The bald black man ignored them. He lowered his head and quickly led Mo away. When the others saw this, they began to discuss in low voices. "My God! Why did the regiment commander change so much? Commander has always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. He would rather die than submit to coercion. What's wrong with you today? Why did you change your mind on the spot? That's so unlike him. Did the commander take the wrong medicine? No matter how strong that Easterner is, with Captain's character, he shouldn't have admitted defeat on the spot. How could they know what their commander had just faced? In today's post-apocalyptic world, life and death were nothing to be taken lightly, and there were many people who would fight if they were not convinced. However, not many people had experienced the despair of looking into the abyss, as if they were about to be swallowed up in the next moment, and the fear that came from the depths of their bones. As for their commander, he was fortunate enough to experience all of this when he met Mo Shi's gaze. At this moment, a white psychokinesis said, "If the commander takes this Easterner to see the general, do you think the general can deal with him?" "I think it's very possible. With the general's strength, the thousands of zombies and vampires outside couldn't break through our walls." "I agree. This Easterner is indeed very strong, but compared to the general, he's too weak." At the same time, when Mo Shi was passing through the long and narrow street, the civilians saw Mo Shi, an Easterner, being taken to the general. They all shook their heads and sighed. Mo Shi paid attention to the expressions and demeanor of these civilians. He felt that these people seemed to be in awe of the general. At the same time, when these people looked at him, some had a trace of sympathy, while others had a sneer on their faces. This made Mo Shi feel that if he was taken to the general, he would be killed in minutes. However, Mo Shi didn't care. In this world, there was nothing that could kill him. Even if the general was really strong enough to kill him, his consciousness could instantly leave his body and go into the body of the sea dragon clone. While Mo Shi was thinking, a Chinese woman on the side of the road suddenly shouted to Mo Shi in Chinese. "Don't go. Don't go to see the general. You must not go." Mo Shi turned his head and glanced at the woman, but didn't pay much attention to her. However, he was already sure that the general's strength should be extraordinary. And it seemed that the entire base was afraid of him. 2 minutes later, Mo Shi was taken to Central Park. Central Park was huge. It was about 4 kilometers long and 0.8 kilometers wide. It was a small miracle that there was such a huge park in Twisting Covenant, where skyscrapers were everywhere. This place was once called the Twisting Covenant Lung. It attracted tens of millions of people from all over the world to visit every year. On the lawn in the park, there was a woman with a hot figure, blonde hair, and blue eyes. She was wearing a tight white short-sleeved shirt and denim hot pants. She looked sexy and hot without losing the sunshine of youth. At this time, she was playing golf. In the apocalypse, there was such a leisurely mood. Other than Mo Shi, she was the second. The bald man whispered to Mo Shi. "That's the general." Mo Shi was a little surprised. He quietly activated the blood dragon's eye and looked at the woman. With this look, Mo Shi immediately understood. All the doubts he had along the way were answered. The bald man brought Mo Shi behind the woman. There was a hint of reverence in his tone. "General," an Asian came in from outside the base. He said he wanted to ask for information. The woman didn't turn around. She swung her club and watched as the ball crossed an artificial lake and accurately smashed into a hole more than 100 meters away. Only then did she turn around. She waved at the bald man. The bald man hurriedly lowered his head respectfully and left as if he was escaping. It was as if he would be swallowed alive by the woman behind him if he was a second slower. At this moment, the woman threw the cue to the side. She pulled off the rubber band that tied her hair. Her golden hair immediately spread out like a waterfall. She turned around and carefully sized up Mo Shi. A moment later, she shook her head slightly. "He's a little thin. But his face is not bad. I've always been more patient with men with good faces like you. Ask what you want to know quickly." After you're done, we'll get down to business. Then, she reminded him, you came from outside the high wall. You should have seen the two men who were eaten, right? If you can't satisfy me, then the two of them will be your examples. Seeing this, Emoshir's eyes were filled with a hint of mockery. He slowly said, aren't you afraid that I'll taint your noble bloodline? Chapter 178. This blonde woman with blue eyes, a hot figure, and a beautiful face. Facing Emoshir, she directly said, ask what you want to ask. After you're done, let's get down to business. Emoshir had a teasing look on his face. Aren't you afraid that I'll taint your noble bloodline? The smile on the woman's face froze. She looked a little surprised and sized up Emoshir from head to toe. How can you tell? Of course, she didn't know that Emoshir had the blood dragon's eye. He could see through the appearance and see through the woman's identity at a glance. Species, vampire, level 10 super mutated, ability, psychic illusion, psychic charm. Because she was from the blood race, everything made sense now. Vampires were stronger than zombies. Therefore, with her here, those zombies didn't dare to rashly attack the base. That was why the nest, which had planned to devour the entire city, didn't continue to expand. And those humans, in front of this powerful level 10 super mutated vampire, could only submit. Even if she wanted 2 men every night, once the 2 men couldn't satisfy her, they would be thrown outside the high wall to feed the zombies. No one in the entire base dared to resist her. Because without her, the super mutated zombies outside the high wall could raise their entire base to the ground in just 10 minutes. Of course, Emoshir naturally wouldn't tell her all this. He simply replied, intuition. Hearing this, the female general laughed out loud. She took a few steps closer to Emoshir and put her slender and fair right arm on Emoshir's shoulder. You can actually recognize that I'm a vampire. I'm getting more and more interested in you. Tell me, what do you want to ask? Emoshir was a normal man. Facing this woman's seductive eyes and seductive actions, it was impossible for his heart not to ripple. But it was just a ripple. This woman was a vampire. He wasn't that hardcore. Emoshir looked at the eyes on the woman's beautiful face and said indifferently, I want to know all the information about the vampire's nest. Hearing this, the woman was a little surprised and joked, you're a human. Why do you want information about the vampire's nest? Could it be that you want to kill your way into the Blood Clan's lair alone? Wipe out the entire blood race? Emoshir's expression was calm as he nodded, yes. When the Blood Clan woman heard this, she couldn't help but be startled again. Then, she burst out laughing so hard that she was trembling. He spoke in the tone of a senior. You're an interesting human. However, do you really think that you can destroy the 13 ancient Blood Clan clans just because your telekinesis is strong? Do you know how powerful Count Dracula is? Do you know that after the Blood Breed virus and Virus X combine, they will mutate and have unlimited self-healing abilities and are basically unkillable? You don't know anything, yet you dare to say such big words. Using an old saying from the East, the ignorant are fearless. Emoshir shook his head slowly. You talk too much. As he spoke, an incomparably powerful dragon consciousness instantly spread out. Under the sweep of his dragon will, the woman in front of him was like a vase that had been smashed to the ground, shattering with a crash. Then, the surrounding ground, trees, artificial lake, bridges, everything, including the entire Central Park, was shattered. All the fragments quickly turned into green light spots and disappeared. And the scene in front of Emoshir had completely changed. At this moment, he was no longer in Central Park. Instead, he was on the second floor of a building in Times Square. In front of him stood a woman. This woman was exactly the same as the woman who had shattered just now. The same hot and sexy, the same youthful sunshine. It turned out that everything just now was an illusion. From the moment the bald black man brought him to the bottom of this building, he had already entered an illusion. However, Mosher's blood dragons I could see through the appearance and see the essence. So when he activated the blood dragon's eye, all the illusions were a joke in his eyes. At this moment, the woman standing in front of him was very surprised to see Mosher break free from the illusion. Although she was a blood clan member, she was also a level 8 psychokinesis. And her telekinesis had mutated. She could create illusions. In the illusions she created, no one could break free. Even those level 10 mutated blood clan members couldn't do it. How did this human break free? However, the surprise on her face was quickly concealed. Her blue eyes looked at Mosher sincerely. Her eyes were filled with tears. She said pitifully, "Sorry, I didn't want to either. I was forced. Can you forgive me?" As she spoke, she emitted a fatal charm. Compared to before, the temptation was 100 times stronger. Under this fatal temptation, her mouth was already in front of Mosher's neck. At the same time, the 4 teeth in her mouth slowly turned sharp. At the same time, a hint of killing intent suddenly flashed in the endless charm in her eyes. She had used this move to kill countless humans. However, at this moment, she heard a faint sigh from this Eastern man. She couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. Wasn't this man already bewitched by her? What was the meaning of this sigh? At this moment, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her brain. It was so painful that she almost lost consciousness. She didn't have time to think and suddenly bit Mosher's neck. Ding ding, 2 soft sounds, as if she had bitten a piece of iron. No, with her strength, even if it was a piece of iron, she could bite through it. But her sharp teeth couldn't pierce through this human's skin. This woman was completely shocked. The teeth of the blood clan members were originally like sharp swords, invincible. The only thing that couldn't be pierced was the level 10 mutated body of Vajra. Could it be that this human strength had reached the level 10 mutated level? In shock, the clothes on her back were instantly torn apart. A pair of huge wings protruded from her back. On the wings, the sharp claws directly pierced toward Mosher's eyes. However, at this moment, swish, a ray of icy blue light flashed. The woman's head flew up in an instant and flew far away. At the same time, her body was quickly frozen. Along with the entire room, it was also frozen. Viscous liquid could be seen from the cut on her neck, bubbling non-stop. It was as if porridge was being cooked in an ice jar. At this point, this level 10 mutated blood clan member was dead. Until her death, she couldn't believe that as a level 10 mutated blood clan member, she couldn't even resist in front of this human. She was actually killed in one hit. What happened to having an body of Vajra after reaching the level 10 mutated level? What happened to not dying even if one's head was cut off? Fairy tales were all nonsense. What puzzled her the most was that this human was completely immune to her telekinesis charm. Was he still AF** King Man? At the same time, on the street not far from the building, the bald black man was waiting for instructions. Usually, at this time, it wouldn't take long for the man to be stripped naked and thrown out. His mission was to escort this man to the door and throw him out to feed the zombies. However, at this moment, bang, something suddenly fell in front of him. He instinctively took a step back. He looked down. The moment he saw it, his expression changed drastically. Chapter 179. When the bald black man saw what was beneath his feet, his expression changed drastically. It was a head. The head that was sealed in ice. Through the crystal ice, he could see the head inside. It was the general's head. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the second floor. He was waiting for the man to be stripped naked and thrown down. However, the man did not come down, but the general's head was thrown down. That man's strength was actually so strong. Was he able to break through the general's illusions and enchantment? Could he break the general's invincible Vajra body? There was another problem. Wasn't he a psychokinesis? Psychokinesis was strong, but his body was just an ordinary person's body. Once other powerful creatures got close to him, he could only wait for his death. However, he was in front of the general just now. Not only did he not die, but the general's head was thrown down. What was going on? Aside from all these questions, there was still the biggest one. If the general was dead, who would suppress the thousands of infected creatures outside the base? This was the thing that scared him the most. Thinking of this, he quickly turned around and ran in the direction of the hunter group. However, after running a few steps, he stopped. Then, he turned around and picked up the general's head that had been frozen. The hunter group's headquarters. A few members were joking. How long do you think that Easterner can last? I think he'll be thrown out in 10 minutes at most. Of course. Even the hunters couldn't satisfy the general. It would be strange if he could. Just as they were talking, the leader had already entered the headquarters. A hunter saw the leader enter and shook his head with a smile. Looks like I overestimated that Easterner. It didn't even take 10 minutes. Another psychokinesis said, nonsense. Of course. Although we psychics have powerful telekinesis, our bodies are still that of ordinary people. How can an ordinary person's body withstand the general's powerful body? Someone saw the bald black man holding an ice ball in his hand and asked in confusion. Leader, where did the ice come from? It's not summer yet. It shouldn't be that hot. A hunter took the ice ball from the leader's hand as he spoke. However, as soon as he took the ice ball, his expression changed. He threw the ice cube away. Everyone was stunned when they saw this. He took a closer look at the rolling ice block. That is, a human head. The general's head. What's going on? Oh, my God, the general is dead. Everyone exclaimed in disbelief. At the same time, on the second floor of a building in Times Square. After Immortal killed the general, he said in his mind, "System, sign in." The system's voice suddenly sounded frowny face. Sign in successful. Sign in event. Killed level 10 super mutant vampire mutant psychokinesis. Sign in reward. Dragon will illusion. Dragon will charm. Immortal looked at the first skill. Dragon will illusion. Creates an illusion using dragon will to confuse the enemy. Immortal nodded slightly. This skill was quite useful. As for the second skill, Dragon's Charm, forget it, let's not talk about it. She couldn't possibly ask him to use his beauty to trick her, right? No man would do such a thing. Then, Immortal flipped through this woman's memories. Through these two memory plundering, Immortal discovered that after these creatures reached level 10, perhaps because their brain cells were already strong to a certain extent. Every time he used memory plundering on them, they wouldn't become idiots. From this woman's memories, he knew that this woman was a vampire who walked out of Castle Dracula. She wasn't the general of the base. Her twin sister was. When she was 5 years old, she was captured by the vampires and transformed into one. However, although she became a vampire, a 5-year-old girl tasted fear and loneliness in that dark, gloomy, and cold castle. Later, she went through a lot of hardships and escaped from the castle. Finally, she found her parents and sister. In the end, her parents and sister hated her because she was a vampire and chased her out of the house. Since then, her temperament had changed drastically. After returning to the castle, she absorbed a large amount of human blood. In the end, she grew into a level 10 super mutant vampire. She also awakened her psychokinesis and even mutated it. Thus, she came back again. She wanted to take revenge on her parents and sister. This was also the reason why she became like this. From her psychokinesis, Immortal knew that her sister was actually locked up on the third floor of this building. Immortal walked up the stairs and slowly reached the third floor. On the third floor, a woman who looked exactly like the general was chained up. However, this woman wasn't as sexy and youthful as the general. She looked like she was 20 years older than the general. Her blonde hair was disheveled. Her originally beautiful blue eyes were now devoid of any spirit. The blood dragons I looked over. Species, vampire, level 0/level 10 psychokinesis, ability, psychokinesis illusion, psychokinesis charm. This woman was transformed into a vampire by her sister. However, she insisted on not sucking human blood, so until now, she was still a level 0 vampire. It was also because she insisted on not sucking human blood that she was tortured every day. Almost every moment, her will was in a battle with her bloodlust. In such a battle, her psychokinesis grew much faster than ordinary psychokinesis. This allowed her to reach level 10 psychokinesis. When the woman saw Immortal appear, a bloodthirsty light suddenly appeared in her eyes. She even lowered her body, as if she was going to pounce on him at any moment. However, this bloodthirsty light was soon replaced by rationality. She quickly shrank into a corner, the chains on her body rattling. She hugged her knees tightly with both hands and let out a squeak that sounded like a bat's, but it was American English. "Don't come over. Don't come near me, go. Otherwise you'll die." Immortal's dragon will moved. Crash, the chain was forcefully torn apart. His current dragon will had already reached a level where he could easily tear apart chains. The woman was stunned and looked up at Immortal. Immortal spoke slowly. "Emma, you're free." The woman was stunned. She raised her head and looked at Immortal in surprise. Immortal didn't pay any more attention to this woman. He turned around and walked downstairs. Previously, he knew from Emma's sister's memory that her sister brought human blood to her almost every day. She forced her to drink human blood. But she refused. It was because he knew this that Immortal let her go. Emma's dark blue eyes flickered. She asked, "Are you going to Castle Dracula?" Immortal nodded. Yes. The bloodthirsty light in Emma's eyes was replaced by determination. "Can you take me with you?" Immortal naturally knew why she wanted to go to Castle Dracula. He nodded calmly. Yes. Chapter 180. Immortal took the woman and slowly walked down from the third floor to the second floor. The woman looked at the second floor that was completely frozen, and then she saw her sister's headless body that was sealed in ice. Tears glistened in her blood-red eyes. Immortal paused for a moment. He waited for the woman to say goodbye to her sister. Then he went downstairs. He walked towards the entrance of the base. The woman quickly wiped her tears and followed Immortal's footsteps. The civilians had already heard the news of the general's death. They looked at the Asian man with shock and fear in their eyes. When the Asian man was brought to the general, none of them thought that he would be able to leave here alive. After all, the general was not only a level 10 super mutant vampire, but also a level 8 psychokinesis. In their eyes, the general was invincible. But now, the Asian man came down alive and well, while the general died an unnatural death. No matter how imaginative they were, they couldn't figure out how the Asian man could kill the general. But this wasn't the biggest problem now. It was another problem. Now that the general was dead, who would deter the infected creatures outside? Emma, who was behind Immortal, suppressed the urge to rush towards these humans. Because it was too difficult, her voice trembled slightly. She asked Immortal, "My sister is dead, who will stop these infected creatures?" There were people in the world who gradually turned evil and perverted after being treated unfairly. There were also people who were still kind to humans no matter how much pain they had suffered. Emma obviously belonged to the latter. Mosher didn't answer and continued to walk forward. In the entire base, in the entire hunter group, no one dared to stop him from leaving. The people on both sides of the street also kept silent. Even those who had sneered and ridiculed Mosher quietly lowered their heads at this moment. They were afraid that Mosher would take revenge on them. A powerful being who could kill the general, if he wanted to take revenge, it wasn't something small people like them could bear. At this moment, an ear-piercing alarm sounded in the base. Beep, 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 at the same time, a loudspeaker sounded. The infected creatures are attacking the high walls of the base. A super mutant zombie has rushed into the base. The announcer's words were extremely hurried. They're coming. Close the doors and windows. Those who can, immediately go underground and hide. Ah, no, amidst the screams, the announcer's voice abruptly stopped. At the same time, the roar of a zombie came from the loudspeaker. Roar. Roar, in the base, when the 100,000 people heard the roar, they were all terrified. On the streets, people scattered in all directions. In the building, people locked all the doors and windows. The entrance to the underground sanctuary was the scene of a disaster. A large number of people rushed to the entrance of the shelter, but they could not squeeze in at all. From time to time, humans would be trampled to the ground, their bones broken. There were cries, screams, and curses all over the place. At the same time, at the gate of the high wall. Boom! The door collapsed with a loud crash. The infected creatures outside the door immediately rushed in like a tide. These infected creatures had previously been suppressed by the general to suppress their bloodlust. Now that the general was dead, their thirst for blood was like a flood breaking through a dam. Behind Mosher, Emma saw this and quickly spread out her level 10 telekinesis. Level 10 telekinesis was enough to tear these infected creatures apart. However, only ordinary zombies could not be resurrected after being torn apart. For those stronger mutated zombies, even if their heads were thrown off, they could still survive. As for the higher level super mutated zombies, they were not afraid of telekinesis at all. A level 2 super mutated zombie, seeing that this woman was so strong, roared from its throat, "Psychokinesis?" Then, it directly pounced on Emma. Emma wanted to use telekinesis to block it, but from the other side, 2 more super mutated zombies pounced. With her telekinesis, blocking 1 super mutated zombie was already very difficult. Not to mention 3. But at this moment, the 3 super mutated zombies that had just pounced in front of Emma suddenly exploded without warning. Boom boom boom, with 3 consecutive sounds, the 3 super mutated zombies exploded into 3 clouds of blood mist. Emma was only slightly stunned. Then, she looked up at the man in front of her. She naturally knew that it must be this man's doing. But, why was this man so strong? She was already at level 10 psychokinesis, but she was far from being able to do this. But this man dealt with it so easily. Could it be that this man's realm had really reached a higher realm than level 10 psychokinesis? But, her surprise had just begun. She saw the infected creatures that were pouring into the base like a flood. When they pounced on this side, they suddenly melted one by one. Like melted chocolate, after falling to the ground, they turned into a pile of meat paste. When she used her telekinesis to explore the surroundings, she found that it was not only these infected creatures that were pouring into the base. Including the thousands of infected creatures around the base, they were also melting quickly. After melting, they quickly gathered in the direction of the Central Park. This made her even more amazed by this Asian man in front of her. This man's telekinesis was so strong. He was so strong that it was far beyond her imagination and understanding. In extreme shock, she could not help but ask, what is the realm above level 10 psychokinesis? Mosher walked forward and said, Psychic Master. Emma asked again, then. You are a psychic master? Mo shook his head, no. Then, he did not say anything and continued to walk forward. Emma's doubts in her heart deepened. If this man was not a psychic master, could it be a realm higher than that? Then, what was it? At the same time, in the base. These humans originally thought that they were going to die today. But at this moment, they suddenly saw the zombies that were pouncing on them melt into meat paste. They were all inexplicably horrified. Oh, sh*t, this is so f**king disgusting. Why did these zombies suddenly melt? They are still moving after melting. What the hell? But for them, they were still very excited that they had survived when they were about to receive their lunchboxes. At the same time, someone saw through the gaps of the high-rise buildings in the direction of the Central Park. There, a huge blood-red figure was slowly condensing and taking shape. Oh my god, what is that? A giant. A blood-red giant. Don't tell me it's another powerful infected creature. Just as they were wondering, the twisted flesh of more than 8 million infected creatures had slowly condensed and taken shape in the Central Park. The huge blood Buddha that was 1,000 meters tall appeared again. Chapter 181. All the infected creatures in Manhattan other than those below supermutation were turned into flesh and blood and condensed into blood Buddhas. However, the 1 million infected creatures in Manhattan were far from enough. Under the shroud of Mo's draconic will, all the 8 million infected creatures in the 5 administrative districts, as long as their level was below supermutation, were all melted into meat paste. They were quickly wriggling toward Manhattan. Gradually, more than 10 minutes later. In the morning fog, a blood-red blood Buddha that was 1,000 meters tall appeared in Central Park. Due to the morning fog, people could not see the upper half of it. However, the sudden appearance of the blood Buddha still shocked everyone. Oh my god, it's taller than the Freedom Tower. What the hell is this thing? If this is an infected creature, then our base is finished. Fear and despair rose in the hearts of the Westerners in the base. However, a few Chinese people recognized the giant's image. This is a Buddha. But Buddhas should be golden. Why is this blood red? A blood Buddha actually appeared among the infected creatures? This is unlikely. Could it be related to the compatriot who just came today? At the same time, Mo's consciousness had already transferred into the blood Buddha clone. From 1,000 meters high, he looked down at the ground covered by the morning fog. This feeling of looking down on the common people made the trace of understanding in his heart increase a little. The draconic will also rapidly strengthened. Controlling the huge blood Buddha clone, he slowly turned his head and looked at the virus hive on the other side of the city. From this angle, the virus hive was like a huge frog with a huge mouth that was about to swallow the remaining half of the city. Mo did not use the blood handprint. He had to save this move for other uses later. He controlled the huge blood Buddha and raised its right foot. It brazenly stepped on the virus hive. Rumble, it was as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was cracking. In the base, everyone felt the earth shake. The surrounding skyscrapers also shook violently. Everyone was shocked. Earthquake? Fortunately, the shaking only lasted for a few seconds. Soon, calm was restored. On the other side of the city, it was not calm at all. Under the foot of the blood Buddha, the virus hive that covered half of the city collapsed. Above the mother nest, the tens of thousands of tumors exploded. Blood immediately gushed out. In the broodmother's nest, all the blood vines and tentacles in the huge blood pool that occupied half of the city were trembling in pain at this moment. The Sanguisurincus wanted to extend upwards in an attempt to repair the nest. However, they were only able to extend halfway before they quickly withered away. When the tentacles saw this, they did not dare to extend any further. Instead, they quickly retracted back into the ground. However, just like the Sanguisurincus, they quickly shriveled up halfway. In the end, he stopped moving. This was because the blood in their bodies had been sucked dry. At the same time, the blood in the blood pool in the broodmother's nest was rushing towards the giant foot of the blood Buddha. They merged into the giant foot. Then, with giant foot as the center, all the infected trees, flowers, and sanguisurincus in the half of the city that was infected quickly shriveled. Not only did the blood Buddha absorb the flesh and blood of all the infected animals, but it also absorbed the blood of all the infected plants. With the absorption of the blood, with Buddha's giant foot as the center, the color of all the infected plants in the surroundings quickly turned from blood red to dark red. After another 10 minutes, the blood Buddha had reached a height of 1,300 meters. At this time, Mosher's consciousness was in the blood Buddha. He looked down at the earth and looked up at the sky. He had a feeling that he was the only one in the world. In this feeling, his dragon mind continued to rise. He controlled the blood Buddha and turned to look at the northern part of New York. That was the St. Lawrence River. On the river, there were more than 1,800 islands of various sizes. This was the Thousand-Island Lake of America. On one of the islands called Heart Island, there was an ancient castle. Bolt Castle. Mosher moved his mind and controlled the 1,300-meter-tall blood Buddha to take a step. He took a step. Rumble, several skyscrapers collapsed with a loud rumble. He took another step. Several more skyscrapers collapsed. Soon, the blood Buddha's giant foot stepped into the St. Lawrence River. Plop, huge waves rose up from the river. At the same time, on Heart Island, in Bolt Castle. This was the lair of the Johnson family, one of the 13 great families of the blood breeds. There were more than 3,000 blood breeds living in the castle all year round. At the same time, there were more than 30,000 blood breeds living on the islands of various sizes around Heart Island. There were more than 100,000 zombies around these blood breeds. At the same time, in Bolt Castle, the ancestor of the Johnson family had just summoned 2 of his clansmen. He instructed the 2 clansmen, "Just now, Count Dracula sent me a message. He said that he sensed that something had happened to his goddaughter, Irene. Irene has always been among the humans of the Manhattan base. You 2 rush over immediately and investigate the situation. Remember, this is Count Dracula's order." The 2 clansmen's expressions immediately turned cold. A mission personally given by Count Dracula was no small matter. The 2 of them hurriedly bowed solemnly and elegantly. "Yes, grandfather." Just as he said this, someone suddenly barged in from outside the door. "Lord Johnson, bad news, bad news." Ancestor Johnson frowned and reprimanded. "How many times have I said that even in the face of pressure, we must maintain our elegance? This is Count Dracula's teaching. Have you all forgotten?" The blood breeds hurriedly said, "Yes. I'm sorry." Then, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Lord Johnson, a blood-colored giant more than 1,000 meters tall has appeared outside. It's coming toward our castle." Hearing this, Ancestor Johnson's heart trembled. Even though he had lived for hundreds of years, he had never heard of a giant more than 1,000 meters tall. This matter was definitely not a small matter. On his back, a pair of wings quickly tore the clothes on his back apart. He directly jumped out of the window. Flapping his wings, he flew into the air. Seeing this, the blood breeds who reported the news were slightly stunned. "Wait, didn't they say that we must maintain our elegance even in the face of pressure? Ancestor, you're tearing clothes and jumping out of the window. That's not very good." Ancestor Johnson flew to the sky above the castle. He looked forward. He saw a giant more than 1,000 meters tall stepping on the river and striding toward the castle. With every step he took, a huge wave appeared in the river. When he stepped down, he could even see the silt at the bottom of the river. In particular, that giant more than 1,000 meters tall was emitting a monstrous demonic aura. Even as a blood breeds who had lived for hundreds of years, he had never seen such a terrifying demonic aura. He had been to Castle Dracula several times. But even the demonic aura of Castle Dracula was far from being comparable to the demonic aura of this blood-colored giant. Chapter 182. Demonic aura was also known as blood aura. Ordinary people couldn't see or feel it. Only those corpse hunters, psychokinesis, zombies, and blood clan could feel it. Only those extremely powerful creatures could produce blood aura. It was the matter in the cells in the body that naturally spread into the space. The stronger the strength, the thicker the blood aura. At this moment, the blood aura emitted from the huge blood-colored giant's body covered the sky and the sun. Ancestor Johnson felt a chill in his heart just by looking at it. Such a powerful creature was definitely not something he could resist. He quickly issued an order to all his clansmen. All Blood clan members, run. At the same time, he issued an order to all the zombies around the Blood clan members. All zombie servants, go up and hold it back. He knew very well that in front of such a powerful existence, it was impossible to escape just by running. Only by letting the 100,000 zombies around them delay it for half a minute would they have a chance to escape. Although all the zombies around them were unwilling to do so, they didn't dare to do it. However, they were afraid of Ancestor Johnson's methods. They could only brace themselves and plan to go up. At the same time, the clothes on the backs of all the 30,000 Blood clan members in Johnson's family were torn apart. They flapped their wings and flew into the air. More than 30,000 Blood clan members fled together. This scene was like the scene of those African birds taking off from the water at the same time in the animal world. It was spectacular. However, just as they flew off the ground, they discovered something strange. They saw that the 100,000 zombies that were originally facing the blood-colored giant. At this moment, they were all torn apart in an instant. Hiss, 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 more than 100,000 zombies were torn apart at the same time. The scene was like hell. The entire river was instantly dyed blood red. At the same time, the torn flesh did not fall to the ground. Instead, it was condensed by some kind of power. It quickly twisted into a chain made of flesh and blood. This blood-red chain was actually more than 3 meters thick. Both ends were in the shape of anchors. However, they were sharper than anchors. One of them was nailed directly to the ancient castle at an extremely fast speed. It pierced through the thick roof of the ancient castle, the ground, and the foundation of the ancient castle. It pierced deeply into the foundation of the ancient castle. The other end split into thousands of blood chains that were as thick as an arm. The tip of each blood chain had barbs that looked like anchors. In the next moment, the tens of thousands of blood chains shot towards the 30,000 blood tribe members. Chi, a blood chain instantly pierced through a vampire's shoulder and hooked onto his chest. He wanted to struggle, but he found that the barbs had already pierced deeply into his flesh. Not only that, after the barbs pierced into his body, hundreds and thousands of tentacles grew out in an instant. Deeply rooted in his body. If he wanted to forcibly pull out the chains made of flesh and blood from his body, he would be able to do so. Then there was only one way, to tear himself to pieces. At the same time, the same thing was happening to the other 30,000 members of the Blood clan. All of the vampires were pierced by the blood-colored chains. The barbs pierced into his flesh. No matter how they struggled, they could not break free from the blood-red chains. Demon binding rope. How could they possibly break free? Even Patriarch Johnson, who was the strongest among them, had his back pierced by a blood-colored chain that was as thick as a thigh. Hundreds and thousands of blood-colored tentacles grew out of the blood-colored chains. They were like blood vessels that drilled into every part of his flesh and blood. Patriarch Johnson was shocked. He tried to pull and cut with his knife, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the chains. The chains seemed to grow inside his body. This was the overbearing power of the demon-binding rope. It ignored levels. Of course, the higher the level of Mo, the shorter the time they could control him. For example, Patriarch Johnson could only control him for 3 minutes at most. However, 3 minutes was enough. The huge blood Buddha was already 1,000 meters away from the ancient castle. In the next moment, the blood Buddha slowly raised his right hand. All the flesh and blood in his body began to gather toward the blood palm. In the end, it turned into a huge blood palm that was 5,500 meters long and 3,200 meters wide, floating in the air. It was like a huge blood-red cloud that covered the sky and the sun. When the vampires saw this, they were all extremely frightened. His face, which was already pale, became even paler. Patriarch Johnson felt it even more strongly. He frantically tore at the blood-red chains on his back and tore off a large piece of flesh. However, the chains seemed to have taken root in his body. All the tentacles had drilled into every corner of his body like blood vessels. Unless he tore himself into pieces, he would not be able to break free in a short period of time. He could only watch as the huge bloody palm slammed down towards the ground. Boom! The blood palm pressed down like a mountain. It slapped on the ancient castle in the center of the river. Immediately, a shockwave spread out. The river water was directly cut off by the huge palm. The speed of the river water downstream instantly increased by hundreds of times. It surged up from both sides. The river water upstream directly flowed backward under the shockwave. All the trees within a radius of more than 50 kilometers were constantly broken under the impact of the shockwave. After the shockwave, only a 5,500 meters long, 3,300 meters wide, and 5 meters deep giant blood-red palm print was left. The river water crazily poured into the palm print. As for the vampires from the Johnson family, without exception, they were all smashed into meat paste by the huge palm. In the distant sky, Missouri Sure's wings flapped lightly as he floated in the air. A hint of understanding flashed through his heart. He could feel that as long as he did it again, his dragon will would be able to break through. At the same time, on a building not far from him. When Emma saw this scene, the shock in her heart was vividly displayed on her face. After a long while, she withdrew her gaze from the huge blood palm and turned to look at Mo not far away. A human could be so powerful. For an ordinary human, a level 10 super mutated zombie that was impossible to defeat was simply a matter of a kick in front of him. The mother nest that was so huge that it almost swallowed the entire city was just a matter of a kick in front of him. And now, the Johnson family and more than 30,000 vampires were just a matter of a palm in front of him. And looking at this Eastern man's appearance, he seemed to be at ease. How could a human strength be so strong? Mo closed his eyes slightly and carefully recalled the feeling when he used the Blood Buddha avatar just now. After a long while, he slowly opened his eyes. Then, he grabbed the shoulder of the woman not far away and flew toward the northwest. At the same time, in the Manhattan base, almost everyone was in a state of extreme shock. Chapter 183. When Mo left with Emma, in the Manhattan base. Those people thought that without the deterrence of the general, those zombies would madly kill their way into the base. The nest would also engulf the entire city, and all of them would be unable to escape. However, more than 10 minutes had passed, and they didn't see any danger except for 2 earthquakes. The terrifying zombies that they expected didn't appear. Amidst the confusion, the bald black captain led a few people from the hunting group to the skyscraper in the base and looked at the entire city. With this look, someone immediately noticed the abnormality. "Captain, look over there, the nest has disappeared." Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and looked at the other side of the city. Indeed, as he said, the nest that originally occupied half of the city had long disappeared. Moreover, the previous half of the city was blood red. At this time, all the Sanguisurincus turned dark red as if they were dead. The streets that were originally densely packed with zombies were now empty, and not even a shadow of a ghost could be seen. It seemed that the infected creatures in the entire city seemed to have been wiped out. This was done by that Easterner? The general was able to intimidate all infected creatures. That Easterner killed the general. Then, they couldn't think of anyone else who could do all this except that Easterner. How did that Easterner do it? Unbelievable, I don't dare to imagine. The mysterious power from the East is really not something that we can understand. Mosher left the Twisted Pact and headed west. In the following day, he annihilated another 3 blood breed clans. Signing in the ancient castles of these vampire clans was quite rewarding. The only regret was that these vampire castles were too far away from the big cities, and there weren't many zombies. He couldn't condense the Blood Buddha avatar. However, there were still billions of zombies in the world. As long as he was willing, he could find a big city to condense the Blood Buddha avatar at any time. At the same time, far away in Romania's Castle Dracula. In a dark hall. On the main seat, a person was sitting. The person's face couldn't be seen clearly, but in the darkness, he was sitting very upright. Next to him was a glass of red wine. The dim candlelight in the castle shone on the red wine, giving off an intoxicating glow. Although he was in the dark, even the darkness could not conceal his elegant temperament. In the middle of the hall, there were 6 zombies standing with their hands down. There were black zombies, white zombies, African zombies, European zombies, and American zombies. Although all 6 of them were zombies, they looked no different from ordinary people. The 6 of them were the kings of zombies all over the world. Count Dracula took the red wine next to him and swirled it slowly. The reflection of the candlelight in the wine glass began to ripple. A moment later, he slowly opened his mouth. Some time ago, the king of zombies in Asia was killed. Another 5 blood clans have been destroyed in the past few days. According to the intelligence, all of this was done by an Eastern human. Your mission is to kill that Asian at all costs. Of course, the 6 zombie kings had heard about it long ago. At this moment, in front of Count Dracula, he did not dare to be the slightest bit negligent. They quickly replied in unison, "Yes, Your Excellency." Count Dracula exhorted again. That human can destroy 5 of our blood clans. His strength must not be underestimated. You must act with caution. The 6 zombie kings once again replied in unison. "Yes, Your Excellency." On this day, Mosher was not far from Castle Dracula. From the memory of a previous blood clan member, he knew that there was a mountain near Castle Dracula. On that mountain, there was a legend about a dragon. This aroused his interest even more. Originally, he planned to destroy all 13 blood clans first, and then concentrate on dealing with Count Dracula. But now he changed his mind. After the past few days, he had become more confident in his strength. None of the blood clan members could withstand a single blow from him. And at this time, the blood slaves had already investigated the situation of Castle Dracula clearly. So there was nothing to worry about. He could just kill his way to Castle Dracula. At night, he came to a meadow by a lake. Mosher planned to rest after setting up the virtual sentry tower. Emma reminded him worriedly. "You destroyed so many castles of the blood clan. They may come for revenge tonight." Mosher yawned and nodded. "Yeah." Emma was puzzled. "You're not worried?" Mosher nodded again. "Yeah." Seeing Mosher's appearance, Emma really didn't take it to heart. She asked again, "What if Count Dracula comes in person?" Mosher smiled. "That would be interesting." Emma was puzzled. Why was this Eastern man so confident? When her sister was still alive, she often talked about Count Dracula. She always said, "That's the most powerful humanoid creature in the world." She wondered who was stronger between Count Dracula and this human. As night fell, Immortal lay on his back on the grass, looking at the boundless starry sky. His thoughts fluctuated. A moment later, the sound of the virtual sentry tower suddenly rang in his mind. Beep, beep, beep. Immortal scanned with his dragon's mind. He immediately discovered that 100 kilometers away from him, 6 figures were running over quickly. The blood dragons. I connected to the sentry tower and quickly checked the levels of these 6 species: zombie, zombie king, level 10 super mutated. Immortal couldn't help but smile. He had thought that these 6 zombie kings were scattered all over the world, which would be a little troublesome. He didn't expect them to come over together. This saved him a lot of trouble. Not long after, the 6 zombie kings appeared in Immortal's vision. Without any unnecessary nonsense, the 6 zombie kings had already surrounded Immortal and Emma. The 6 zombie kings condensed 6 different weapons on their right arms. There were knives, spears, swords, and whips. There was even a zombie king whose entire right arm was split into 4 pieces. It was like a big flower had bloomed. However, the petals of this big flower were all sharp teeth. They directly bit at Immortal. The attacks of these zombie kings were extremely fast. They almost instantly arrived in front of Immortal. And they had a clear division of labor. 4 zombie kings attacked Immortal, and the other 2 attacked Emma directly. Of course, their main goal wasn't to take Emma's life. Instead, they used this to distract Immortal. In their opinion, since this human had brought this vampire along for so long, he must be very concerned about this vampire. Therefore, this vampire was this human's weakness. Chapter 184. Among the 6 super mutant zombies, 4 of them attacked Immortal directly. Their attacks directly enveloped the area within a kilometer around Immortal. The area was covered by the light of all kinds of knives, swords, spears, and whips. Immortal had nowhere to hide. Immortal didn't hide. In fact, he didn't need to hide at all. A layer of blood-red scales quickly appeared on the surface of his body. A blood-red dragon-shaped helmet instantly formed on his head. Ding! 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 Several ear-piercing sounds rang out from his dragon blood armor. Sparks kept appearing on his dragon blood armor. At this moment, Immortal didn't move at all. The dragon blood armor completely absorbed the huge power of these people's attacks. As a result, Immortal just stood there and swayed slightly. The 4 zombie kings all changed their expressions. Their attacks could even injure a level 10 super mutant zombie with an invincible body. The scale armor on this human's body actually had such a strong defensive power. The so-called invincible body didn't really mean that it could defend against all attacks. If they met someone stronger than them, such as Count Dracula, they could easily tear apart the invincible body. As level 10 super mutant zombies and zombie kings, their full-strength attacks might not be able to tear apart the invincible body. But at least they could injure it. And now, the armor on this human's body was even stronger than the invincible Vajra body. Of course, they didn't know that the dragon blood armor's defense could defend against any attack on Earth. Not to mention them, even if Count Dracula himself came, he would not be able to break through the defense. While they were still in shock, Immortal moved his right hand slightly. A blood-red machete appeared in his hand. Dark Ice Devil Slayer. With the 6 zombie kings' powers, the moment they saw the blood-red blade, they knew that it was not a simple weapon. If this human attacked with this machete, even they would have a hard time dealing with it. Their only chance of winning now was the female blood race. 2 zombie kings had already caught Emma. They hissed in their throats, "Put down your weapon, or we'll kill this woman." Before he finished speaking, Immortal suddenly turned around. The dark ice devil-slaying blade in his hand hacked down at a zombie king behind him. Seeing this, the zombie king was shocked. He quickly raised the long saber in his hand to meet the attack. Chi-chi, two soft sounds were heard. The zombie king was cut into two halves along with its blade. At the same time, the zombie king's body was frozen. Furthermore, with him as the center, the frozen area was rapidly expanding. Almost in the blink of an eye, it reached the feet of the other three zombie kings. The bodies of the three zombie kings were frozen in an instant. The remaining two zombie kings, who were holding their weapons against Emma's neck, were shocked. They originally thought that once they subdued this female vampire, this human would have some misgivings and wouldn't dare to make another move. At the very least, even if he wanted to play tricks, he would have to go through the process. But he never expected that this human would have no scruples at all. In fact, he didn't even hesitate in the slightest and instantly attacked. In this way, the zombie kings were caught off guard. They didn't know Immortal's character. Although this Emma had something to do with him, it wasn't a big deal. The reason why he brought her along was because this woman was related to the place near Castle Dracula, where the legend said that a giant dragon had once appeared. That was all. How could he be subdued because of her? Taking a step back. Even if this Emma had more to do with him, as long as she wasn't as close as he was with Happy, he would definitely not hesitate to attack. After all, he had always believed in one sentence in his heart: in the apocalypse, survival was the way to go. To be subdued and even lose his life for a woman who had little to do with him, he would never do such a stupid thing. At this time, the two vampires saw that the ice had already reached their feet. They quickly jumped and instantly jumped 100 meters into the air. At the same time, on their backs, wings tore through their clothes and stretched out. Everyone's wings were more than 5 meters wide. But when they flapped their wings and tried to escape, they found that their feet seemed to be pulled by something, and they couldn't escape at all. When they looked down, they saw that their feet were wrapped by a sanguisurincus as thick as an arm. At this time, below the sanguisurincus, the ice had quickly spread along the sanguisurincus. The two vampires' expressions changed drastically. They flapped their wings frantically, and at the same time, their arms turned into sharp blades, trying to cut off the sanguisurincus. However, it was too late. The chi of frost was spreading at an incredible speed. In just 2 seconds, it had spread to their feet. Then it spread to their legs, waists, chests, necks, and heads. In the end, the two vampires were frozen in the air. They looked like two ice kites that were being released. Originally, with the strength of these zombie kings, even if their bodies were surrounded by a 5-meter thick ice layer, they could still break out of the ice. However, the cold air emitted by the mysterious ice devil slayer was no ordinary cold air. After the surface of their bodies was frozen, the cold air directly entered their bodies through their pores and sweat pores. It froze every single cell in their bodies. Think about it, if every single cell in your body was frozen, how could you still be able to jump around? Moreover, the mysterious ice devil slayer had a strong restraining effect on infected creatures. In order to expel this cold air, in addition to having an extremely terrifying physical strength like Count Dracula, one must have energy in the body. Unfortunately, they didn't have the strength of Count Dracula. Secondly, it was impossible for them to have energy in the body. As a result, the 6 zombie kings could only watch as their bodies were frozen from the inside out. At the same time, the ice layer was still spreading rapidly. The entire lake was frozen in a very short time. A mutant fish had just jumped out of the water and was directly turned into ice. It fell on the ice layer below with a thud. The ice layer continued to spread outwards. Within a radius of 10 kilometers, everything was frozen in just half a minute. Immortal's draconic thought swept across, and the 6 zombie kings were directly turned into blood-red ice fragments on the ground. Mo Shi raised the mysterious ice devil slayer and carefully looked at this blood-red curved blade. This was the first time he used the mysterious ice devil slayer at full strength. The effect was not bad. Although in terms of attack range, it was not comparable to the bloody handprint, let alone the draconic thought meteorite. However, in terms of restraining infected creatures, it was definitely not weak. At this time, Emma, who was not far from him, widened her eyes. She looked at the ground that was completely covered in ice in disbelief. Chapter 185. Emma looked at the frozen world. The lake water was frozen, the plants were frozen, and even the mutated birds that were flying in the sky were frozen and fell onto the ice. Her face was filled with disbelief. After a moment, she retracted her gaze and turned to the Asian man in front of her. She had already seen the powerful strength this Asian man had displayed before. No matter how strong this man was, she wouldn't be so surprised if he could destroy a country with one move. But now, with this slash, everything within a radius of 10 kilometers was frozen. She really couldn't understand. This wasn't a magic world, and he wasn't Princess Aisha. How could he freeze everything within a radius of 10 kilometers with one move? She really didn't understand. Mo Shi really did have the strength to destroy a country with one move. Mo Shi finished all this as if nothing had happened. He put away the mysterious ice demon slaying blade. Then with a thought, he took out a recliner from his backpack. He placed it on the ice and lay down comfortably. Looking up at the night sky, his eyes reflected the starlight. Emma, who was next to him, was very puzzled by Mo Shi's ability to make things appear so casually. But she had seen Mo Shi play like this many times during this period of time, so she was already used to it. Mo Shi seemed to be looking up at the starry sky at this time, but in fact, he was signing in his mind. System, special event sign in. Sign in successful. Sign in event, kill the zombie king, sign in reward, 60 zombie king crystal cores. Mo Shi looked at the reward and couldn't help but smile. 60 zombie king crystal cores were enough for him to advance. He thought that he would waste some time since he hadn't signed in at the Dragon Palace for the past few days. But he didn't expect a pleasant surprise. He didn't have to avoid Emma. With a thought, he took out more than 10 zombie king crystal cores. Holding them in his palm, they turned into streams of heat and flowed into his body from his palm. After a while, he absorbed all 60 crystal nuclei of the zombie king. At the same time, his body temperature rose rapidly. After reaching the limit, he stopped for about 5 minutes before his body temperature slowly returned to normal. Breaking through was that simple. Looking at his mind, he saw that his attributes had changed. Name, Mo Shi, Level 8 Great Hunter, Level 2 Long Nian Shi, Evolution Direction, Titan Dragon. He was now a Level 8 Great Hunter, one step closer to the limit of Level 10. Emma, who was not far away, did not know that in such a short time, the Asian man in front of her had increased by one level. She only saw a smile on Mo Shi's face for a while, and then he seemed to sigh. She had no idea what this man was thinking. The next morning, Mo Shi took Emma and flew toward Romania. At the same time, in Dracula's castle in Romania, Count Dracula had also received the news. Although the messenger of the Blood Clan couldn't see Count Dracula's face, he could see his elegant and noble figure in the darkness. Earl, the 6 zombie kings you sent were all killed by that human being. Count Dracula paused for 2 seconds, a little surprised. I underestimated that human. In Count Dracula's opinion, the zombie kings were the most powerful beings in the world besides himself. He thought that it would be easy to send 6 zombie kings to kill that human being. He didn't expect that the 6 zombie kings would be killed by that human being. But what's done is done, it's just 6 zombies. The messenger of the Blood Clan continued to ask, Earl, he's coming. Count, he's coming to our castle. Should we prepare anything? Count Dracula chuckled and said, "What do we need to prepare? Do you think the tens of millions of mutant bats around the castle are just decorations?" When the messenger of the Blood Clan heard this, he thought of those mutant bats and felt a chill in his heart. There were tens of millions of mutant bats in the forest around the castle. The individual strength of those mutated bats was not strong. But when tens of millions of mutant bats attacked at the same time, even a level 10 super mutant Blood Clan would be killed in a very short time. He had seen with his own eyes 3 level 10 super mutant Blood Clan offend the Earl. In the end, the Earl ordered tens of millions of mutant bats to attack together. Those 3 level 10 mutant Blood Clan members didn't even last half a minute. Thinking of this, the Blood Clan member quickly lowered his head and replied, "No." At the same time, he also thought of Count Dracula's strength. Those tens of millions of mutant bats were so strong, but they were still under Count Dracula's control. It was clear that Count Dracula's strength was stronger than those tens of millions of bats. With those tens of millions of mutant bats and Count Dracula's double insurance, that arrogant human being wanted to attack Castle Dracula was simply wishful thinking. Count Dracula said, "So we don't need to prepare anything. Just wait for that arrogant human to walk into the trap." The messenger of the Blood Clan member nodded. "Yes, Count Dracula." Then, he carefully retreated. Until this moment, a pair of blood-red eyes lit up in the darkness. Count Dracula's voice sounded. "I, Count Dracula, have not used my full strength for more than 300 years. The humans in this world have probably forgotten the fear of being dominated by Count Dracula." The next afternoon, Mosher brought Emma to Romania. 80 kilometers away from Castle Dracula, Mosher floated in the sky. At this moment, the blood slave quietly flew over and landed on Mosher's shoulder. Through the dragon telepathic communication, the blood slave had already told him everything about the castle. Mosher knew that there was a cave on Mount Sarati behind Castle Dracula. People once said that it was the dragon's lair. But in an earthquake, the entrance to the dragon's lair was shaken and collapsed. But in fact, there was another entrance to the dragon's lair. It was in the wine cellar under Castle Dracula. This was also the reason why Mosher traveled so far to attack Castle Dracula. Within a few hundred kilometers around Castle Dracula, there were no cities or zombies. Because Count Dracula felt that those zombies were inferior creatures that would tarnish his castle. But the blood slave had previously detected that there were tens of millions of mutant bats in the forest around Castle Dracula. And these tens of millions of mutant bats were enough to condense into a larger blood Buddha. Thinking of this, Mosher was secretly delighted. In his mind, he checked the evolution points. Along the way, he had already accumulated more than 9 billion evolution points. Destroying these tens of millions of mutant bats and destroying Castle Dracula would definitely break through 10 billion points. At that time, the system would be upgraded again, and the rewards would be much more. And his dragon telepathic communication would probably directly break through to level 3. At the same time, he could check in at the dragon's lair. Killing many birds with one stone. Chapter 186. Above the forest to the east of Castle Dracula. Mosher and Emma flew over slowly. Vampires could be seen flashing past the forest on the ground from time to time. Emma was shocked when she used her telekinesis to investigate. There were more than 100 blood breeds within a radius of 1,000 meters from her. But this was not what surprised her. Castle Dracula was the lair of the vampires, so it was not surprising that there were so many vampires around. What surprised her was that there were hundreds of mutated bats hanging upside down from almost every tree below. And they were all mutated vampire bats. Before they mutated, they lived by sucking blood. Now that they had mutated, their faces were even more ferocious. Their faces looked like those of a wild boar. But they were not as long as a wild boar's nose. Two long fangs were exposed at the corners of their mouths. Each mutated vampire bat was more than a meter long. Their wingspans were more than 3 meters wide. With so many vampire bats surrounding her, even she, a level 10 psychokinesis, would have a hard time dealing with them. Moreover, this was only the vampire bats within a radius of 1 kilometer. If all the vampire bats in the surrounding forest were added up, there would be millions or even tens of millions of them. Even a level 10 super mutated zombie would not have a complete corpse if it barged in here. However, she turned her head to look at Immortal. This Asian man's strength should be able to easily deal with so many mutated vampire bats. And with this Asian man's personality, one slap from him could probably turn the entire area around Castle Dracula into ashes. Thinking of this, she hurriedly said to Immortal, who was beside her, "Can you let me go down to find my son first?" The reason why she took the risk to come to Castle Dracula with Immortal was that her sister had once taken her son to Castle Dracula for revenge. And turned him into a vampire. She came here to find her son. As for the reason why Immortal brought her here, it was not because he was touched by the great love of a mother. This woman did make him feel good, but it was far from the point where he would bring her all the way to the lair of the vampires just to find her son. He had brought her here for another reason. Seeing Immortal's silence, Emma thought that he didn't agree. She begged, "Please, let me go down and look for my son. Just give me half an hour. Whether you can find it or not, do it when the time is up, okay?" Immortal shook his head. "Sometimes, the result may not be as good as you think." Emma was slightly taken aback. This Asian man seemed to know something. Her blood-red eyes flickered slightly. After a while, he said with some difficulty, "No matter what the result is, I will accept it." As they spoke, in the forest below, a mutated vampire bat suddenly flapped its wings and flew into the air. Then, the second, the third, the fourth, tens of thousands of blood-sucking bats flapped their wings and flew up. In the entire forest, more than 10 million bats flew up like a swarm of locusts, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. Even though Emma had already expected that there might be more than 10 million vampire bats here, she still couldn't help but feel her heart beating wildly at the sight of such a majestic sight. She subconsciously looked at Immortal, who was next to her. But she saw that Immortal still had an indifferent expression on his face. He was as calm as an ancient well. It was as if it wasn't tens of thousands of vampire bats that flew up, but just a fly. Soon, those tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats gathered in the sky. They actually gathered to form a huge bat pattern. Just think about it. How big would it be if 10 million huge vampire bats, each of which was more than a meter long, formed a gigantic bat pattern in the sky? It would cover the sky and cover the sun. The ground instantly darkened. The whole sky seemed to be occupied by this huge vampire bat. At the same time, a terrifying but elegant voice came from the huge vampire bat. "Easterner, you dare to break into Castle Dracula alone. You are too arrogant." Seeing this, Immortal slowly shook his head. This Count Dracula was not only pretending to be mysterious, but also blind. But on the surface, he didn't say anything. Before a fight, he never liked to talk nonsense. If he could fight, he would never talk nonsense. Count Dracula saw that Immortal didn't want to talk nonsense with him and seemed a little bored. He said, "I thought that all Easterners like to be reserved, but I didn't expect you to be different. Since that's the case, then accept the judgment of Count Dracula." Before he finished speaking, the huge bat pattern formed by tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats in the sky flapped its wings slightly and swooped down towards Immortal. Because of the flapping of its wings, within a radius of more than 50 kilometers, leaves suddenly flew and dust filled the air. On a nearby lake, there were also huge waves rolling. In the forest, the trees were constantly emitting cracking sounds. Seeing this, Emma's face suddenly changed. Even though she knew that Immortal was very strong, she couldn't help but be shocked at this time. After all, when she followed Immortal all the way here, she had never encountered such a strong attack. Immortal just shook his head slightly. With a thought. In the next moment, she saw the tens of thousands of vampire bats that were rushing towards Immortal melt at an extremely fast speed. They turned into tens of thousands of blood-red meat paste and fell from the sky. Pa, 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 they fell to the ground. It was as if there was a rain of flesh and blood. Within a radius of tens of kilometers, all the trees, grass, and lakes were covered with a layer of flesh and blood in a short period of time. And this flesh and blood carpet was wriggling quickly, slowly condensing into a giant statue. About a minute later, this giant statue finally took shape completely. It was actually a blood Buddha that was about 2,000 meters tall and completely blood-red. The blood Buddha stood between heaven and earth. In heaven and earth, only I am supreme. Its eyes were lowered, looking down on everything as if they were ants. In the hall of the ancient castle not far away, Count Dracula suddenly stood up in the darkness. He looked at the blood Buddha that stood proudly between heaven and earth not far away in surprise. He originally wanted to control these tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats to attack that Easterner. Even if he couldn't kill that human, it could still cause great news to him. When the time came, he would be able to kill this human easily. But he never expected that this human didn't even move, and these tens of thousands of mutated vampire bats were turned into meat paste. And they even condensed into such a huge blood Buddha. Previously, he had heard from his subordinates that the blood Buddha was terrifying. Therefore, he had been mentally prepared for this. The previous 2 times Immortal's blood Buddhas were condensed from the flesh and blood of zombies. So he thought that Immortal couldn't condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of mutated beasts. And these mutated vampire bats all had the blood of the blood clan flowing in their bodies. Even if that human could really condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of mutated beasts, he didn't think that the human could condense the blood Buddha with the flesh and blood of the blood clan. If it could be condensed, wouldn't it have been condensed long ago? Why wait until now? But he never thought that this was a trick that Immortal had left behind to numb him. Chapter 187. Count Dracula didn't expect that Immortal still had a trick up his sleeve. In fact, the blood Buddha avatar could be condensed from the flesh and blood of any infected creature. Immortal had only condensed from the flesh and blood of zombies the previous 2 times. Even when he was only 1 step away from condensing the dragon will, he didn't use the flesh and blood of vampires to condense the blood Buddha avatar. This was to make Count Dracula lower his guard. To make him think that Immortal couldn't condense the blood Buddha with vampires. At this time, the blood Buddha condensed by Immortal was 2,000 meters tall. Immortal looked down through the gaps in the clouds from the blood Buddha's perspective. He saw that the originally huge castle Dracula was now like a castle built by a child with blocks. He moved his mind. The blood Buddha's right palm slowly raised. The clouds and the surroundings started to move in all directions as the giant palm was raised. At this time, Emma, who was being held by Immortal and floating in the air, saw this giant palm, and her heart suddenly sank. If this palm fell, all the vampires would be finished. Her son would be finished too. She wanted to beg Immortal not to make a move first. However, based on her understanding of Immortal along the way, she knew that this Asian man would never be merciful. She could only cry and look at the castle below with difficulty. At this time, on the ground, in the forest, there were more than 100,000 vampires. They saw the giant blood Buddha and the bloody palm in the clouds in the sky, and their faces were full of shock and horror. Even their count doesn't have this kind of strength, right? Furthermore, the gigantic blood Buddha gave them an extremely strong sense of oppression. Under this extremely strong sense of oppression, they didn't even have the slightest desire to fight. The only thing they wanted to do now was to escape. Almost all of the vampires flapped their wings and wanted to escape. But soon, a giant blood-red chain with a diameter of more than 10 meters appeared in the air. Both ends of the chain were pointed and had barbs. One end was directly nailed to the ground and pierced into it. It plunged deep into the ground. No one knew how deep it was. The other end quickly split into more than 100,000 chains and shot out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it pierced through the bodies of all the Blood Clan members. Even Count Dracula was no exception. At this moment, Count Dracula saw the giant blood Buddha slowly condense into a giant palm. A trace of shock appeared in his heart. For a mere human to be able to reach such a level of strength was far beyond his imagination. However, at this moment, a blood-red chain suddenly pierced through his body, causing him to be even more horrified. One had to know that his body was dozens of times stronger than the body of a normal level 10 mutated Blood Clan member. He didn't expect his body to be pierced through so easily. In his shock, he hurriedly tugged at the chain, wanting to tear it apart. His strength was immense. However, when he pulled, he was surprised to find that the chain was extremely sturdy. Even he couldn't break it. This brat, Count Dracula, was both shocked and angry. He was Count Dracula, the ancestor of the vampires, yet he was being tied up by a lowly human. Unforgivable. Unforgivable. Fortunately, after a moment, the chain in his body seemed to loosen. He pulled hard and forcefully pulled the chain out of his body. Although he also pulled out a fist-sized piece of flesh, it was nothing to him. His wound would heal very quickly. However, he soon discovered that the fist-sized wound on his chest had not healed at all. His self-healing ability seemed to have disappeared. How could this be? Ever since he became a blood breed, his body had an extremely strong self-healing ability. Even if his arms and legs were broken, they could grow back in just a few seconds. Now, it was just a hole in his chest, but it couldn't heal. What the hell was this? If it were an ordinary blood breed, they would definitely be terrified and turn around to flee. However, Count Dracula was not a blood breed who would give in easily. The noble blood of the blood breed flowed in his body. How could he admit defeat to a mere human? It was impossible for him to escape. Escape was impossible in this lifetime. He bent his body slightly, and in the next moment, he leaped up. He directly crashed through the roof of the ancient castle. While in the air, his body was rapidly changing. His body was rapidly growing in size. Soon, he reached a height of 100 meters. When he spread his wings, they were more than 500 meters wide. His eyes were blood-red as he looked at the large blood palm that had already formed. An ear-piercing shriek came out of his throat. Squeak! This shriek was obviously a sound wave attack. In his shriek, the clouds in the sky rolled and quickly spread out in all directions. All the blood breeds had their bodies pierced by the demon binding rope and were originally extremely terrified. However, when they saw the 100-meter-tall Count Dracula, they were all overjoyed. Was the Count finally going to use his full strength? The Count had not used his full strength for hundreds of years. This lowly human did not understand the terror of the Count when he used his full strength. At this moment, the huge blood palm that was 10 kilometers long and nearly 6 kilometers wide was not affected at all by Count Dracula's shriek. It slammed towards the ground. The surrounding sea of clouds churned and surged wildly. Upon seeing this, Count Dracula bellowed in anger. "Lowly human, lowly species, how dare you offend the noble blood breed?" As he spoke, he flew towards the blood palm. Boom! The blood palm came down from the sky and bombarded the ground. Suddenly, a shockwave like a tsunami quickly swept across a radius of hundreds of kilometers. All the trees within hundreds of kilometers were directly torn apart by the tremendous force. All the infected creatures, including the level 10 mutated blood breeds, were directly torn apart by this shockwave. The level 10 mutated blood breeds were originally the strongest beings in the world. Now, they were directly torn apart by the shockwave of the blood palm. This was unimaginable in the past. In this huge shockwave, all the flowers and trees on the ground within a radius of 100 kilometers were directly swept away. Only the bare ground was left. The nearby mountains also seemed to shake violently a few times. Large chunks of mountain rocks rolled down continuously. When the last mountain rock fell, the whole world was finally quiet. Between heaven and earth, only the figures of Moshe and Emma were suspended in midair. Emma's pair of blue eyes were wide open as she looked at the ground. The ancient castle on the ground had long disappeared. Only a huge palm print that was 10 kilometers long and nearly 6 kilometers wide was left. Looking down from the sky, this palm print was blood red. It was so red that it seemed as if blood could drip out. It was so red that it made one's hair stand on end. It was so shockingly red. You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.